That's awesome. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Grog Talk. I'm James.
I'm Dan.
And where are
And
we from today, Dan?
well, we're sadly still in the abyss, the sixth layer, right?
Yes, we are in the sixth layer of this abyssal burrito or bean dip of hell or Hades.
Yeah, still riding the blood river.
Right, that's right in the blood river of pain. So,
We've got a giant spider raft.
what is there a name for the sixth layer of the abyss?
Now, well, we know I can't see now. You can't do that to me because what you're doing is you're tempting me
Oh, okay, I can look it
to
up.
check to go off of right to minimize Skype or whatever, and we know that's risky. You're going to lose me. Maybe people want me to take that risk.
Yeah,
The connection in the abyss, the internet connection. They
right.
need to. Elon Musk needs to help out with that or something, right? Get some satellites down here because
Right. Well, the
it's not.
5G it's the coverage map of the abyss. You know how like when you go to a cell phone carrier and they show you the map and it's like completely covered. It's not so good here in the abyss.
So soon we'll have like now the coverage extending to the abyss.
Right. That would be awesome.
For you delvers.
Someone texted me. Let's see.
You mean like a personal text?
I don't know. I'm getting unknown lands. Oh, I see. Okay, it's not me. I'm part of other chats, and these people are chatting with each other. Okay, so that's cool.
You realize we're broadcasting the
Yeah,
show now.
it's just a train wreck, right? Anyway, the sixth layer per fandom is the realm of a million eyes, which is different than. And it's the realm of the Great Mother, chief goddess of the Beholder pantheon. I like that.
Whoa! You like that?
That sounds impressive. The realm of a million eyes.
So wait, the chief mother? So you mean there's like a beholder kind of deity or something, or demon?
Great Mother, that's right.
Mama,
Mother. Oh, let's see.
Mama, we're coming home.
Yeah, it's just a giant beholder.
Wait, or is it? You know what? There's a
Yeah.
rumor she's actually a giant gas spore.
That's right.
Let's find out.
You can hit her once and explodes for 20d6 damage.
Hope you're right.
Well, I did that. I did put a gas spore in. There's a random generator. And again, hello to everyone from the Grog Empire. I see a number of our dear friends. The Sagacious One, the Captain General is on. Our dear friend, the Angry Monk, is on. Other folks. But I used a random generator dungeon to set up random monsters. And first level, it had a gas spore. Now, metagaming, as we like to say, which is using outside knowledge for play, most first level characters, they know they're not going to meet a beholder first level. Or you're sadistic if you're doing that. So they roll a random encounter and the gas spore comes. And what do? Half the people are like, no, don't touch it. This one magic user, I shoot magic missile at it. And so what does it do? It explodes. So it was pretty funny. I'm like, who would do that? But apparently they did it in the 70s and they still do it today.
That sounds awesome.
It was awesome.
Well played. Well played.
It was a lot of fun. Speaking of fun, here in the States, they're starting to relieve some of the stay-at-home orders, right? We're able to go out and get infected in faster rates than we were before. So,
right. Looking forward to the rebound.
Right. Yeah. I think they have testing centers. They should just have virus centers. You should just be able to just go there and get the virus. I think they're called supermarkets, but if there could be other places they could just set up and you can just get it over with. Because at this point it's kind of frustrating. But assuming this trend continues, that we will have GrogCon, October 9th through the 11th. Whoever survives the pandemic, hopefully you'll be able to join us then at the Days Hotel by Wyndham. And we're still looking forward to that. We got to get with Craig at some point. I'm sure he's kind of holding off to see how things are going, but hopefully in the next month or so we can get with him and finalize some of the dates.
He's kind of like our governor
He
now,
is.
right? So we're waiting for information from him. Like, he's. I wonder if he has a Dr. Fauci?
I don't know. Yeah, he needs someone. He needs someone who's going to who says if it's, because if not, then you've told me that I'm hosting GrogCon, which just sounds
Yes, at your
amazing.
house.
Yeah, nothing like,
Doesn't it?
yeah.
BYOP, bring your own pajamas and sleeping bag.
And a swab so we can test you and temperature check. That would be good too.
Yeah, I'm sure your wife is going to be thrilled.
Yeah, so that you may be it may be good. Yes, thank you. I'm not planning to go. I'm staying in my secluded bunker, and my Zoom account. We're all using Zoom or Skype or something to talk to everyone. My background is a atomic bomb shelter from the 50s. That's what I look like now. I'm just hanging out, waiting for it to happen. Also want to give a shout out to Brian, who's online. His weekly, he DMs every other week. Grognard's Guild Online, it's going very well. I played a couple of weeks ago. It was super fun. If you're interested, go out to the meetup. Also, DM Josh is running Temple of Elemental Evil. So if you are home, locked in, and you're not playing, give us a try. It's usually Friday evening, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And next week, we do not have Grog Talk, but instead, we have a very special patron live event that will be streaming 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And what are we going to be doing, Dan?
We're going to be running The Halls of Tizenthane by Albie Fiore.
Yes. Probably, is it fair to say it's your favorite adventure?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, Rising of the Dark by Daniel Collerton would be second, but yeah, it's definitely Halls of Tizenthane.
So we've got 4 folks lined up to play, plus you and I, maybe some special guests as well. So it'll be a fun event, 2 p.m. Next week. And again, thank you to our patrons who make this happen. We know with the economy and everything else, you have plenty of priorities to provide support to, and if you're continuing to do that, thank you. If you'd like to be a patron, go to patreon.com/grogtalk. We do have a heraldry coming up. I just got to get with we have a new patron who has, I just need to find out what area he or she is claiming. So that'll hopefully next week. Swedish Challenge, again, Japan is killing it. We got up to number 21 during this week. So again, thank you to Minion and other friends out there. Very exciting. We did get an iTunes review, again, thanking us. I don't have the exact one. I'll have to look it up. So please, that's always great if you leave a review, good, bad, or indifferent. That's how people can find us. Okay, so let's get into the random encounter.
All right, let's do it. So it's so the champ remains Charlotte.
Charlotte, yeah, we named it. We kind of broke the rule. We named her even although it was only 2 weeks or like a week and a half, but she survived because typically when we name something, they die horribly. So yeah, she's still here. She's good to go.
Okay, so I will do the Dorso roll.
Okay.
It is a 3.
So that is the Fiend Folio.
Okay, let's find the Fiend Folio. I've got my Fiend Folio here. So have you watched Community? Because it's on Netflix now.
Oh, it is? I don't have Netflix. I'm cheap, but I could. I've seen Community before when it was on originally, but I didn't see all of them.
Because there's, I guess, at least 2 D&D episodes.
I've seen the 1 D&D episode, yeah.
I saw the first 2, yeah. And then there was, I think they had 1E books.
Oh, yeah, they were playing 1E. That's right.
Yeah, that's very cool. Okay.
It's pretty funny. It was pretty funny.
It was pretty funny, and I think Abed, who was the DM, was the perfect guy to be the DM because he's just like, I stay neutral. I don't, he was like completely, he's not going to fudge a die roll. If you die, you die. He was the quintessential DM. I loved it. But I digress. Okay, so you are rolling, I believe, a die 10.
Die 10. Sir. Yes. And it is appropriate where you're using the British monster manual for today, since we are talking about White Dwarf and a number of other things. So, 9.
9. Oh, this is going to get interesting. Hold on a second. I'm turning.
And flipping.
And flipping.
simultaneously.
We are in tropical and near tropical conditions. Well, we are in Florida.
Which is, many would say, is the abyss. It's
Yes.
the sixth layer.
And England is tropical and subtropical, isn't it?
Is it?
It's
Yes.
a fit with the theme.
That's right. Yeah. I remember all those great stories of the coconuts and palm trees there. Yes, that's exactly. So what am I rolling?
Okay. Oh, we were one away from astro and ethereal. Okay, so you are rolling. Well, hold on a second. This gets complicated. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 9 different locate. We need to know the predominant terrain.
Okay.
So I need you to roll, I guess, a D10.
Right.
And re-roll if it's a 10.
Yep, I just rolled a 10. 3.
We're in the forest. In tropical, and so that is sort of. I mean, abyss seems hot.
Right.
But it seems like it would be hot, right? I don't know why I said that.
I would say absolutely it would be a terrible landscape like that. Yep, that makes sense.
Okay, so we are in a tropical forest in the abyss. I need you to roll percentile dice.
Percentile. Oh, that's right.
Yes. No, this is not the whatever it was, the 2 to 20 or whatever it is.
99.
Wow. Okay.
Orc.
No, a giant poisonous toad. It's poison on poison action.
That's right. We like that.
We do.
That's right.
All right. Finally, somebody who can handle this giant spider.
Giant poison.
Are they immune? Because you have poison. Are you immune from poison?
No,
is it like COVID? They think that maybe if you get it. So do you have the antibodies for poison if you are a giant toad or a giant spider? What do you think?
No, I think poison is poison.
Well, thank you, Dr. Fauci.
Yes. Well, poison is poison. Listen, I'm no doctor, but my understanding is, I guess you're saying because they poison their victims that, that at some point they consume their victims and that poison gets in there. I don't think that's how it works, but I would say yes, you can poison. Anything can be poison.
Please tell me you were not a fan of the band Poison back in the day.
No.
Thank you.
Unless it was someone I was trying to date who liked poison, then.
That's why you had hair like them.
Yes, and you can see what happened to it.
It's all that hairspray. It killed it.
This was one Aquanet too many times. I reached for the Aquanet once too many times.
You paid the price, but it was worth it.
Yes, those crazy days. But they're still trying to do stuff. It's crazy. But
you know what I like about this entry? It's 2 sentences.
Yeah, this is our. I don't want a dissertation.
And look, we've got a picture. I don't know if he's poisonous.
Yeah.
But of course we got the great. Yep.
Yeah, there it is. This is what toads do. They swallow things.
You know what I like? Can you show that guy again? Because what I like about that guy is he's just given up, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's just
He's not even trying to push himself out. Right. He's just like, yeah, I can't win this. I might as well go easy.
That's right. Let it happen.
You know what? Maybe you know what it was? It was a trick. He's like, hey, stick your head in my mouth. Or maybe it's like the two Mahars.
Right.
And it's a statue. He thinks it's a statue. It's a trick.
Wow.
And the other players are like, stick your head in there.
Yeah, try. It's like you stick your tongue on the pole when it's cold. Exactly.
Right? Because he's just limp.
Yeah, exactly.
And his sword's down. I like how the toad is got his sword. He's covering it. He's like, I don't even think so, buddy.
Yeah, he's like moving it away. You don't need that.
Yeah, sliding it slowly away.
Move that away.
Oh, that poor dude. That guy's got like an intelligence of 7. He has intelligence of 5. That's the reason why he had to become a fighter. That was the only choice he had.
Yeah,
okay.
And it's just interesting because they're medium, but yet I don't know how that's a medium unless that's the ice toad.
Maybe he's eating a halfling.
Well, or a gnome, but that's a thin gnome. That looks probably more like a halfling.
Maybe. Yeah, you're right. That is out of proportion. I don't think that's an ice toad.
No.
Which is large.
Right.
Giant toads are common. I know we're not talking about giant toads, but you see they're common?
Right.
Wow, okay.
And it's interesting because this is really more appropriate for the giant frog, if I remember correctly, because the frog can swallow you whole.
Yes, yes.
Not really the toad. So
yeah, it doesn't indicate it at all, does it?
Right.
What do they do? What do they just hop on you? So giant, they have one attack. What are they attacking with? Their mouth?
The giant frog? Yeah, one attack.
Giant toad.
Oh, giant toad, I'm sorry, yes. Yeah, they're attacking with their mouth. They're biting you, apparently.
But isn't it just kind of gummy?
Well,
so it should.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, because now I'm curious. How does a giant toad really cause damage? Does he just sort of gum you to death?
Or maybe he hits you with his tongue. You know.
Is it particularly sharp?
That's right.
I mean, he's licking you. What you're saying is he's licking me.
That's right. He's insulting you with his acidic, sharp tongue, I guess, yeah. Well, it's 2 to 8.
Yeah, because I don't.
It's pretty powerful.
Yeah, 2 to 8. That's like a longsword.
Broadsword, technically. Yeah, longsword's D8. Yeah. Broadsword's 2 to 8. It's pretty painful. But I don't think this is the right. Now, again, I don't know if toads and frogs, which one has. I guess, well, I think they just basically use the same picture for both. Which, by the way, I'm glad we're not doing a poisonous frog or a giant frog, because that's 5 paragraphs or 4 paragraphs. So.
Oh, he's cooler looking, though.
He is cooler looking, but he's uncommon. And he gets 3 attacks. He makes, I'm sorry, 1 attack, but it depends on it. Well, anyway, we're diverging, because I shouldn't have brought the frog up. I'm sorry. Yes.
Well, no, but it's interesting, because there is a lot of, there probably is confusion between the two. All right, this is what I think about the giant toad. I think the giant toad, he basically kind of, he smushes you. So I think what's happening here, this isn't a swallow.
Okay.
That guy's dead.
Right.
He chomps on you. I don't know. He doesn't have teeth, but I think he just sort of like crushes you.
And then dissolves you. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, but you think about it. That's hard to hit. How does he hit? I mean, he's like, his mouth is coming at you.
Like Pac-Man.
You know what I mean?
Like a Pac-Man.
Like Pac-Man.
I like
That's
that.
weird. All right. Well, the poisonous toad, thankfully, is uncommon.
Right.
AC 7, 6-inch movement, but it does have a 6-inch hop.
Right.
So it's not an enormous hop, but it's a hop. 2 hit dice. It's never in its lair. It has no lair.
Yeah. It's a one.
It's
traveling toads.
Itinerant. Yeah, we're the traveling toads.
Yeah, they're more of a. Did I see them? Who did I see them with? The traveling. Not the Wilburys.
I think it was the Dixie Chicks. Did they open up for
or the Toadies? The traveling Toadies. There you go.
The traveling Toadies.
I like
they opened up for the Dixie Chicks, I believe.
I believe so.
At a festival.
South by Southwest. That about 1992 or something like that.
Not REM, not ringing a bell. So the poisonous toad does less damage.
Yes.
The poisonous type of giant toad is indistinguishable from non-poisonous toads. Their bite.
So they bite.
Okay, so we've now clarified. So it is clearly a bite, right?
Yes.
Their bite necessitates a saving throw versus poison, or the victim will die immediately. What if you lick it, like the outside of it?
I think you get warts then. I think that's what happens.
Okay. All right. So it's I'm the poisonous toad.
You are the poisonous toad. With the acidic, with the poisonous tongue. It's so appropriate. This is.
But you don't know that I'm a poisonous toad.
That's true. It's your Charlotte. It's indistinguishable to her.
So she's walking through the forest.
Well.
That makes sense.
Right. The steamy forest of the realm of a million eyes.
Right. Okay. All right. And so now it's time for distance, right?
Well, surprise time.
Oh, we don't do distance first?
I'll do distance, sure. It is.
You always do distance.
It is 80 yards. We're outside, so it's 80 yards away.
Okay. And so now is it
now it's
surprise?
That's right. There's no surprise bonuses.
I'm in trouble, buddy.
I rolled a 3.
I rolled a 2. This is the worst possible result.
That's right. 2 segments.
Oh, I'm done. I'm AC7.
Well, the good
Oh, I
news.
never even saw it come. You dropped on me,
Well, the good
don't you
news is I
think?
still have to make. Well, I guess you could do that, but if you, it is 80 yards away. We said so that would be farther. I
Oh,
couldn't move that fast. I couldn't even hop that fast. But
but don't you think that it should be that, even though it's 80 yards away, then I get surprised somehow? Like I don't see you coming? Because otherwise, the distance rule would always kind of negate the surprise rule, wouldn't it?
well, the distance rules if you don't know if it's a truly random encounter. That's the idea. You use distance when you have no idea when you roll a random encounter. If it's a known
Mm.
encounter, like you open the door and the orcs are in there, that's when the surprise rule really takes advantage.
So how would this work? So we're in the forest.
Yes.
So there's certainly, even though we're 80 yards apart, it doesn't mean someone's not going to be surprised, right? Someone could be walking along
Right.
and be not hear the other one and be quite startled, right?
Well, now we're back to surprise, and as far as distance, again, line of sight, it depends on light, noise, actual area. You could make all these changes to it. Is it planned? Is there surprise? Let's see. Surprise can only be a factor in close encounter situations.
Oh, there's the sentence.
If surprise exists, the distance between the parties will be from 1 to 3. So there you go.
If surprise exists.
Right. So that's what's in.
Wait, does that mean
Go ahead.
does that override the distance rule?
Well, it's on page 62, and now we really are segueing on the DMG.
You think we know what we're doing by this
No.
point? Episode 55. What's the rules?
Well, it's because you couldn't just accept that I was going to move to close. You're like, no, I want the toad to die horribly. Right? Because you're the toad. Yeah, you're the toad.
I'm the toad.
Yeah. So
Well, I'm really no. I just want Loth to appear. Okay, where is the distance rule?
page 62 of the DMG. When encounters occur, this is second column, third paragraph. The distance.
Oh, there it is. Distance. Yes.
Between concerned parties will be 5 to 10 inches, 64, subject to the following modifying factors, and there are 6 modifying factors. Line of sight. If this is obstructed and light is involved, the distance possible for determination of another party present is virtually infinite, or it could be sharply reduced. Noise. If one party is making considerable noise, which is discernible, the latter will have options of fleeing or concealment, the former negating the encounter, the latter allowing distance to be 1 to 4 before discovery by the noisy party. Actual area. So again, you have to take into account the size, but we don't know any of these things. Planned or unplanned appearance. A sudden precipitation of one party upon the other due to a number of factors. And
Okay, all right. This is going to be my argument for here. If you look on page 61, there's 6 phases, correct?
Yes.
Of an encounter.
Yes.
Number 1 is determined if either or both parties are surprised.
Right.
Now, can't you make an argument?
Which I recall, didn't I want?
I'm surprised.
Didn't I want to do surprise first, and you wanted to roll distance. I just want to state that for the record.
You are correct, sir. I will concede that. You are correct. So now here's the question. Does the fact that I am surprised, should it override? Because it says surprise can only be a factor in close encounter situations. Does a surprise override the distance roll, or does the distance roll override the surprise roll?
Well, if I read this properly, and this is why your experience as an esquire is super important. Surprise can only be a factor in close encounter situations, that's period, if either or both parties, so that seems like that sentence, that thought is complete. Now the next thought is, if either or both parties are surprised, the distance must be either 1 to 3 inches, or it must be less as determined under the actual area modifier. So the first sentence says, surprise can only be a factor in close encounter. So if they're surprised, which is the first thing you do in the encounter, then it would be a factor. So I would say that they would, to your point, realistically they would drop your thing of the Charlotte dropping on the toad makes a lot of sense.
I think that's more fun, right? So in other words, because then so many times, at least in our little game here, it would override the surprise roll,
Right.
which I don't think would be a lot of fun. And I'm the rule of cool. So I say then if there's surprise, we just ignore the distance, or you could do the distance, but it's 1 to 3.
Well, if it's 1, then they can immediately attack because you're within 10 feet. If it's 3, then you still have to use some of your movement, which you move it per segment to do that. So
if we roll on surprise, this is riveting, isn't it? If you roll on surprise, then we would roll for 1 to 3.
Correct. That's what I just read.
So you are now. So now you're rolling for so the new distance roll is for 1 to 3, correct?
That's right. So if it's surprise, from now on it's 1 to 3. And I'm sure we're going to forget this, but actually this is what people like. I mean, if you see all the new people who are coming on the show, they appreciate us going over this 1E shenanigans to do that. So
the only question is, will we remember any of this?
No, they probably won't. But that's why we have folks with us.
So I guess this is the way you would play it in, like, if you're doing a hex crawl.
Right.
That's the way you would play it. So if you so all right, got it. Okay, all right. So it's 1 to 3.
Yep. So this time they're still 30 feet away. So now.
But you're a hopper.
So now, more fun with math. So you take he moves 12, but 6 is on the ground.
I see. You see 6 plus 6 hop.
Yes.
I thought it would be like 1. No, that makes sense. So why? Tell me what happens here. What does he like? Move along and then moves along, hops.
Yep.
So you see a 12-inch total. Half of that is hoppage.
Correct. There's half and half. Although the smaller, it says for giant toads, all toads are capable of hopping their movement distance. This hop clears objects to up to 1/3 the linear distance in height and requires but a single round to accomplish. And they can attack in mid-air or at the end of their leap.
Oh, so you were smart to go to giant toads. Oh, I think his name should be Sir Hopsalot if he wins, but okay.
Okay, Sir Hopsalot, you got it.
Well, I'd like to just put that in I know oftentimes mine are rejected, but that's fine. I'm not bitter. Okay, so all toads are capable of hopping their movement distance. So this hop clears objects up to 1/3 the linear distance in height. Oh, in height, and it requires but a single melee round to accomplish, and they can attack in midair or at the end of their hop.
Right. So I'm basically going to say he's going to he's going to jump on you, and I'm going to also argue because it's 30 feet that he's basically going to charge you. Or
hang on, can we make this a little more interesting?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm hanging.
Right. He's going to try.
And he's in air.
Ooh, I like that.
Like the Gar.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So
just
Gar glitter gold.
Gar glitter gold. He tried to eat you. It's basically everyone wants to eat Charlotte. But
Jesus, there's all these things, these flying things in the air. Toads, Gars.
That's right.
The abyss is terrible.
That's right. Well,
for a spider,
it is.
The abyss is no place for a spider.
It's a tough world. So I'm going to argue that the first segment is used to move. Now, technically, if you were going to do this correctly, which we're not all about, you divide the movement by segments and you move that amount per segment. So if you move 12, it would be 12 feet per segment, but we're not going to do all that. We're just going to say, because we're doing the rule of cool, he gets one leaping attack at Charlotte, is what we're going to do.
One leaping attack?
That's right.
One total leaping?
What's your armor class for a spider?
7.
7. I rolled a 12. I think that's probably going to miss, but what hit dice?
So you just go like zooming on past.
That's right.
I'm like, what was that? Did I see something? Well, I do have 8 eyes. How the hell am I surprised?
Exactly.
Shouldn't a giant spider be like surprised only on a 1 in 6 or something?
Oh, I hit. Oh, there you go. That's great. Yep.
Oh wait, wait a second. We're getting confused. I'm the toad, aren't I?
Oh yes, I'm the spider. That's right. I keep forgetting. You're right. I apologize. You roll the dice.
That means, right? So, I was surprised.
Oh yeah.
And I'm the toad.
Yes, that's right.
The spider is dropping on.
Yes.
We need to hit the rewind button.
Retcon that.
It's like a TV show, but that's not what happened.
We're going back. That's right. Yeah, this is hard, folks. This is really hard. I'm sorry. Okay, that's right.
How many people are signing up for our virtual game?
4, fortunately. I didn't want too many more because we can barely manage this. All right, so I still rolled a 12. You are the toad. Your AC
Yes.
is...
I'm surprised.
Yes.
I'm hopping along.
Right.
And you drop on me.
Correct. And, well, I still hit. Your AC, this is AC 7.
Yeah, you get... Right, so you just get one last. So you drop on me, and that's one action.
Yeah,
is that right?
Yes, that's right. And
because you were 30 feet. Yo, you were high up there.
Right. We're in a big tree.
And you just...
Remember, we're in the forest.
Yeah, and so you're to hit is like to try. I'm hopping along, and you're trying to time it perfectly.
Exactly.
You see me coming.
Right.
And you're like, ooh, tasty.
Poisonous toad. Yummy.
No, you don't know it's poisonous. That's what's funny about it.
Indistinguishable, correct.
You're just like, oh, giant toad.
Exactly.
And because you're playing the odds. Giant toads are common. Poisonous toads are uncommon.
Right.
You're like, what are the odds
Right.
that this is poisonous?
Yeah, it's unlikely.
Not good.
Yeah.
You'd have to like roll a 99.
Well, if you pull out the poisonous sac, I'm sure the rest of it's pretty good. It's typically that poison. It's good eating past that.
Well, the poisonous sac is a delicacy too, but it's got to be prepared properly.
Right. That could be something that maybe we could do once we're done with the pandemic. We can go to like a place where they serve, that famous fish that poisons people to death.
That's the name of one of the restaurants in our town, the Poisonous Sack.
That's right.
It's their specialty.
After you survive the caves of chaos, come on down to the Poisonous Sack and have Chef Dan's special toad sack.
It's all poisonous dishes, right? That's his spell. Like it'll be like poisonous spider. Right. Like that's what he does. He's like trained for like decades.
And maybe 1 out of every 10 sacks is not poisonous because they're indistinguishable. So, I feel fine.
Right.
Yeah, because you didn't get the poisonous sack. That would be the opposite. Because yes, everything would be poisonous. There'd be people going there trying to ingest poison, like in The Princess Bride, to make themselves immune to.
Right.
I'm immune to poisonous sack, poisonous toad. That's right.
All right.
Oh,
okay.
I also got an idea of a Dungeons and Dragons cookbook. That's another thing for merchandise.
That's an awesome idea.
That's good. I like that.
Why for some strange reason does the name Kelly Villamere come into my head again?
Yes. We got to get
so many of these. We really need to get. All these people wrote stuff freelance for free. Have you noticed that every time I ask one of our guests if they were getting paid, they just never answer the question?
Yeah, they never made a dime off this. So
we need to follow their lead, right? However they pulled it off.
One of our folks is cute. He said, "What did I miss? Which creature died?" He's thinking that we actually got to the combat yet.
It's only been 40 minutes. We're only 40 minutes into the show.
That's right.
We're still talking about the difference between the toad and the frog, right. And we figured out the distance. All right. So you're rolling now.
I rolled to hit, and now you have to make a saving throw.
You hit? What'd you roll?
I rolled a 12.
I missed that.
Yes.
Okay, and that hit because I'm an AC 7.
Right. They're both AC 7.
Ugh. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, when you're both AC 7, you know who loses? The guy who is attacked first. Okay. So here it comes. Oh no.
What'd you roll?
I rolled a 9.
9. Against poison?
That doesn't seem good, does it?
Nope.
That was fast.
What hit dice? 2 hit dice?
2 hit dice. Am I +2? I'm +2, aren't I?
Yes. So
that's an 11.
You needed a 14. Now, and I would even give you a +1 because would even argue maybe +1 or 2 because you're a poison creature, but that's not enough. So.
Okay, hold on a second. Now we know I'm going to pray to the toad deity, but let's talk about this. How long does it we've talked about this I think many times.
Yeah.
How long does it take for poison to work? So in other words, what was I was surprised though.
Yes.
Well, that's only a segment of time.
Right, that's right.
That's 6 seconds. So what I want to know is, if I don't die immediately, you need to roll. It's only 1 hit point of damage we know?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, you have more than 1 hit point.
So you've bitten me. So I want to know, do we keep going here?
Keep going for what?
Meaning another round.
Oh, no.
Do I have enough time? Why not?
No,
Is that fast?
yeah, what we're talking about for those who are listening, or those who care, is monster poison versus.
Yes.
And there's some interesting things because one of the spells you can use against the statement in the Dungeon Master's Guide relating to poison, monster poison, is pretty emphatic, I think, if I recall. Let's see.
Oh, we certainly know it. It's obviously save or die.
Right. And I think it's on page 79, returning and flipping.
Yeah, there's a little bit on 81, though I'm not
81.
seeing anything.
Yeah, the exceptions for death, blah, 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 blah. Very large creature in sports would not like to be... Yeah, it doesn't say anything specifically.
We've seen this somewhere. We've had there's a discussion about time, right? Isn't there?
Well, here's how I've always done it. Like I said, poison saving throws for characters, because again, we typically think of a character, not another monster. But they have poison saving throws for monsters. Those are there are exceptions to the death rule for poison. Any creature with a thick layer will be totally immune to poison from creatures which are not able to penetrate this fat layer. So swine, werebears, that's interesting. So back to, similarly, very large creatures poisoned by are not likely to die. Even the poison of a deadly coral snake would not likely harm a dinosaur. So you have to consider both of these cases when reaching a decision. Then above it, if this is so-called damage, they're talking about, I've always said that death is quickly. When you if you fail your saving throw, you die. Now, under slow poison, it says, you can revive up to an hour before they die, after they were poisoned or something like that, if I remember correctly. It's too early for this.
There's a reference to a minute or so. I'm telling you, in my head, right? I just don't know where it is. It's a minute or so.
Right. And
that's important because isn't around a minute?
Yeah, so you're asking, do you have a minute to do the... Yeah, I think we've talked about this, that what can you do for the last round of doing that? And I've always argued that, you can do the death monologue at the end.
Do you quickly write out a will?
Right, it's like, I always loved you kind of thing, or I was hoping to see the 7th layer of the abyss one last time. And,
no, it's going to be Loth, come save me. That's what it's going to be.
That's right. Well,
or avenge me.
And that's what I think you get when that's what the toad could do. He can cry out to the frog god, which thank God that Carlos is on, because I'm not sure who the frog god is. I'm sure there is one. So
does anyone in the chat have any thoughts on whether how quickly I'm going to die?
No, they haven't said anything. They're not
helping me at all.
This is worse than usual, I think, is what they're saying. Frog God Games, that's true. Nope, no one's saying anything related to that. So
it says, I know, I'm telling you though, it says somewhere, and you know it, because you're familiar with it, somewhere,
yes,
it says a minute or so.
Yes, I think you're right. So more importantly, what are you trying to, what does the frog want to do in this minute or so?
I want to attack you.
All right, so it's initiative then. All right, I will give you run.
Well,
round.
what if I get like a 6 and you get a 1?
Right.
I might have a shot at. I might not be dead. I mean, it says, right?
No,
all right,
you're dead.
So,
you're poisoned.
Well, no, I'm sorry. Not dead. I'm not dead yet.
That's right. Can't we do anything?
I got a minute, buddy. I want my fracking minute. You can't.
Okay.
You can't give me a minute.
Okay. Well,
seriously?
So what is your action?
How rude.
I will, but then you either do divine intervention. That's what you're going to use your minute for, or you attack.
You're a big meanie.
Yes. But if you do divided intervention, I'll give you plus 5% because you're taking the whole minute. You're using your last breaths to do
Okay,
this.
fair enough. Well, so do I have to win initiative to even have a chance at divine intervention?
No, you don't have to. You get it regardless because she's moving. She's about to wrap you in webs to suck the blood out of you.
Oh.
So.
Oh, it's like Shelob time.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
all right. All right, so I'm going to, my declared action is I am praying to the frog deity, which we don't know what that is yet.
Well,
no, I know exactly who it is. You know what it is?
Who?
It's a type, what, no, demon. Isn't there a frog type demon frog face demon?
She's, Carlos is saying is Wastri, the hammer of demi-humans.
He's like our theologian.
He is.
Our expert.
He is.
Theologian. But no, you know who also is a possibility is type 2, demon.
Oh, the one that looks like a frog?
Exactly. Right?
Yeah, I like that. Well, we do this almost on purpose for Carlos. We may actually know who the Greyhawk deity is, but we don't say it because it really makes him sad that we know literally nothing about Greyhawk.
Maybe I should roll while you're talking about it because this may be moot.
Mm-hmm. This is moot.
So I'm just going to roll.
This has been.
It's not moot yet.
It's been moot for a long time, but yes.
Our show started moot. Okay, I'm rolling.
Okay, 15%. I'm giving you extra.
It's an ent moot. 61. That stinks. Let's see what I would have rolled on initiative.
Yeah.
2 anyway. Oh, it's all terrible.
Yeah, Wastri is the hopping prophet, which I sort of remember.
That sounds like a good bar too, doesn't it?
The hopping prophet, yeah. It's poisonous sac, and it's right next door to the hopping prophet.
Right? This down's writing itself. All right. That was fast. That's over.
Well, we wanted Charlotte to
Wow.
win, so that's good.
Well, I want Charlotte to die and pray to. Well, she's trying to get home. She's trying to get to the 60. You think she's going to make it to the 66th layer?
So far,
Wow.
we'll be doing this for a
Okay.
long time.
Okay. So she's eating. She's rapping, as you said. Sir hops a lot.
Yeah, Wastri's croak will confuse all creatures in 40 feet who hear the sound. There you go. I'm looking up Wastri now. He can summon the following, all the groups. He can do bullywugs, giant toads, poisonous toads, or ice toads. So that was the deity.
Oh, he's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that would have been
again,
it.
thanks to Carlos from Castle Entertainment for keeping us straight when it comes to deities. All right. Now we're ready for spell selection.
Let's do it.
We're ready for spell selection. That took almost an hour. So at this rate,
Yeah, what happened to Naked and Afraid, and what would
encountering Demogorgon.
Yeah.
When are we going to have time for that?
Let's keep moving.
You going to roll percentages?
Fast, roll. Yes, I will.
I'll let you roll it.
So this is
You want
for our
70
new
or above?
listeners.
That's right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I always like to pretend we might have new listeners.
Yes.
For our new listeners, this is, I think we're like the coronavirus. Our curve is flattening and now declining. So we were spreading, but then people started social distancing. And so this is, we're going to randomly roll a spell and we're going to talk about it. And I rolled a 46. We rolled to see what type of spell it would be based upon the scroll
Rule.
random
That's right.
rule.
That's the scroll rule.
And I rolled the scroll roll. 64, I assume that's a magic user.
Yep. Now you have to roll 90.
Come on, yeah.
90 or above.
Illusion. 90 or above. Oh, a 9. I saw that 0, 0, and I got excited.
All right.
So it's a magic user.
D10.
Okay. Which one's that again?
Really?
Oh, there it is. I just used it. A 9.
Oh, there you go.
Oh. Whoa.
There's only
This
12.
is serious.
D12.
Okay. A 6.
Monster summoning 7.
Whoa.
The best monster summoning that you can have.
Well, let's summon a monster. We're going to summon a monster, aren't we?
Yes.
Why wouldn't we?
So this is a fun spell because it's going to tell you to keep going back because there's been 7 other ones.
Oh, that's true. So it's going to see, that would be awful. It's like C monster summoning 6, and then that said 5, then that said C4.
Exactly.
And then you go to monster summoning, right?
Well, so it's on page 93 of the Player's Handbook.
Look, did you see what's on page 93? Quick
Yes.
photo.
Maybe that's right. Maybe that was the part 1 in the monster manual. This was the before shot, before it's swallowed. Yes, that's right. We should show that to folks.
Is that a toad or is that that's a frog?
I think that's a frog.
That's a toad.
Is that a
That's
frog? I can't tell.
Frog. Oh, look, he's got teeth.
He does.
The mystery's solved.
Yes, he has teeth. He's not.
That's why
he doesn't
this
gum.
spell was randomly selected to get us here.
The dice don't lie. That's if
they don't. And look, yeah, that's the before picture.
Right.
It is like a little. He looks like a Keebler elf, doesn't he?
Like a
He's like a little.
Hello.
He's like a little guy.
Hello, little.
Would you like a pastry? Nice little. Yeah, that's terrible.
It's pretty similar, except this guy has brown shoes, black shoes, and the other one has white shoes. But you could definitely see potentially the pros and cons for both. There you go. All right.
Before and after. All right.
Nice. Good catch on that.
Thank you.
Page 63. It takes 9 segments.
Wow.
Takes a while.
This spell summons 1 or 2 7th level monsters, which appear 1 round after the spell is cast, or 1 8th level monster, which will appear 2 rounds after the spell is cast. Do I get to pick? Or is it random?
I don't. We'll have to see.
Okay. So all other details. Okay.
See Monster Summoning 1 for other details. So we have to go back in the book. Keep going back to Monster Summoning 1, which I think is a 3rd level spell.
Oh, because I was on 1st level. I'm like, that doesn't make sense.
Yep, Monster Summoning 1. There it is.
That's not too long. So, all right. So within 1 to 4 rounds of casting this spell. Now I'm longer, aren't I?
Yeah. So this.
Or maybe I'm not.
This takes quicker. When Monster Summoning 7, they show up quicker because this takes longer.
Oh, that's right. 1 round, so they're stronger and quicker. The magic user will cause the appearance of from 2 to 8 first level monsters selected at random by the referee.
Yep.
But whose number may be either randomly determined or selected personally. Oh, okay. So the DM has discretion here, according to the strength of the monster randomly determined. Oh, so the referee can pick.
Yeah.
That's interesting. These monsters will appear. That's no fun. These monsters will appear on the spot within spell range desired by the magic user, and they will attack the spell user's opponents to the best of their ability until she commands that attack to cease. So do they know automatically, or do you have to tell them? So do you play it that they're kind of under the command and need to be pointed out?
They have some kind of general, the magic user has to point at them.
Get that, dude. Okay. Or the spell duration expires, or the monsters are slain. Note that if no opponent exists to fight, summon monsters can. Why would you do that? If communication is possible, and if they are physically capable, perform other services for the summoning magic user.
There you go.
So what you could do is you could just summon a monster into you. So you're behind the wall, and you summon a monster into the marketplace.
Yes.
And you're just like, all those peasants are my enemies.
Right. Yeah, basically.
It's terrible.
Right, but you don't know what it is, and again, the DM
true.
has discretion on that.
But they're not going to attack you. They're going to attack your opponents as designated by you. So who do you care what it is?
Well,
right?
That's right.
Either because what do they say? They appear, and then they stay until he or she commands the attack to cease. I'm not going to do that. Or the spell duration expires, or the monsters are slain. So, this is awful. You could use this as sick entertainment.
I think you can use it as sick entertainment because the only time you mention spells is in unleashing them in the marketplace.
That's true. I'm a retired magic user. I'm a retired wizard. I'm bored.
Get off my lawn. Get out of my square.
Oh my God, that'd be terrible. The kids are on the lawn, and so you summon a monster?
Right. People just hang out in the town square. Their spring has sprung, and we'll see what you summon in a second.
Oh, this should be a new segment, just like the grumpy old wizard.
The grumpy old wizard.
Get off my lawn. Here's an Umber Hulk. Where's Billy? Never came home. One day, he just never came back. He went out to play.
He's just
He just
constant.
never came back.
He's just what? I told you
They
not to go
searched the
by.
wizard's.
Yeah,
They searched the wizard's house. They found nothing.
that's right. I told
There's
him.
no evidence.
I told him not to go by that crazy wizard's house. He's angry.
Okay. All right.
So
that's so the duration is 8 rounds. Oh, plus 1 round. Okay, and you're great at this stuff. What level do I need to be to cast this spell?
9th level, you need to be 18th level. So it's going to be 27 minutes then, basically.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Hang on. Wasn't there a component?
26 rounds.
But who's counting? And what is my spell component? I think they listed the material, didn't they?
It's a bag. It's a bag and a candle, which, by the way, does not have to be lit. It says.
So it's not like the joke at the front door.
I don't know.
We leave the dog poop in the bag.
Oh yes, that's right.
And you light it.
That's right. It's not flaming poop. No, you don't have to do that.
The material components spell are a tiny bag and a small candle. Why?
It doesn't say.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. All right, let's take a look at the DMG.
Well, I went there.
See.
Page 46.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Trying to move it forward a little bit faster.
This train wreck.
Yeah.
Along.
Yep.
So it's got monster summoning. It doesn't have 7 on. Oh yeah, it does, and it says C for a list of all monsters. Oh, and it's going to say that every time, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Now,
Appendix M.
Go ahead. Yeah, we have to go to Appendix M, but we could also check. Yeah. So you have to go to Appendix M for this.
Okay, I'm there.
So the only issue with Appendix M is obviously it's just monster manual. Later, if you wanted to incorporate new monsters, you'd have to adjust this chart for that if you wanted to.
Is that are those Perytons above?
Yes.
It was a champ once. Heartless.
That's right, Heartless, the champ. And Blink Dogs and Displacer Beasts is on the next page, 222, 223.
Oh. Yeah, is that what those are? They're so tiny. What are they eating?
A Displacer Beast.
Wow. Well, that's a good picture. You know, I haven't spent a lot of time in the appendices. Well,
I'm guessing they're Blink Dogs because Displacer Beasts are not nice, and Blink Dogs are. But
we're good, right? So is summon monsters basically the magic user equivalent of conjured animal?
Yes.
Before.
Correct.
Oh wait, when the conjuring illusionist does so illusionists are like clerics though in this respect because they're conjuring animals. It says.
That's right.
Illusionists. Oh, that's interesting. All right, so we are rolling 7. Oh wow.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Well, the first question is: are we on water? Are you on a body of surface water? Because if you are, the next page, which everyone kind of misses, is there's some notes on it. It looks like this is the complete table, but if you go to page 224, there's more information about Appendix M. It says, remember that it's always your purview to not only select what monster is summoned, but to appoint the numbers as well, where applicable. Thus, you may select to have rats come to a first level summoning, but because they're relatively linked, you might also allow a maximum number to appear. The major drawbacks to personal selection is that players might view as personal bias on the part of the DM, whether pro or con. It's quite obvious that there are superior and inferior monsters on each list, and the general rule, it might be better to allow random selection sans interference from the gods. There you go.
I love any use of the word sans.
Sans, that's right.
I love it. So, all right, what's the percentage chance? No, it should definitely be random. I love the random. I never, as a DM, would not do the random. I would never pick it myself.
Sure.
So, what are the odds that we are on the
Blood River? The Blood River?
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think?
I'd say 10%.
Okay, I'm rolling.
Is that the grog line?
You heard that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me see. Hang on. Let's see if that's
considering
the fact
it's probably
that
your daughter.
I don't have the. Well, I don't have. Yeah, you're being too loud.
Yeah,
even in there.
Shut up.
It probably is. Let me see. Okay, I got a text from James.
Thanks. That was like an hour ago.
James is rebooting, apparently.
Yes, I did that before.
Okay.
That was an hour ago.
Oh, my dermatologist is back open.
Oh,
that's good to know.
Good to know. Excellent.
I gotta go. I gotta leave. There's gonna be a line. Do you realize once they open up salons again, it's gonna be like mayhem, right? I mean, it's gonna be like getting a reservation or at a really good restaurant. Okay. I rolled a 78, so I think we're not on water,
Correct.
right?
All right, so now roll percentages. We're on page 223. Monster summoning 7. Let's see what we can get.
Okay, let's go. Let's get something good. Ooh, this is interesting. 66.
That's appropriate.
Is it going to be Loth?
It's disappointing. It's a mummy.
No. Are you kidding me? A mummy in the marketplace? Can you imagine?
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
And you could argue, because I don't know, it's so interesting that the range of these, you go from a type 3 demon, which is pretty powerful, succubus, chimera, Etten, to Etten, stone giant, gorgon, hydra, intellect devourer. But yeah, mummy's good. Mummy's a terrible creature to unleash on the town.
Yeah, because don't you either need a magical weapon to hit or
and they
fire
cause
damage.
fear on humans.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So yeah, a mummy in the marketplace.
That's horrible.
Mummy in the marketplace.
Yeah, so
yeah, it would be awesome.
So yet again, you as the magic user, it took you, I think, about 14 hours to memorize this spell.
It was worth it.
Yeah, you rested. You took half a day.
I'm like, well, tomorrow's going to be awesome. Go out there in the morning.
Yeah. So I see. So Dan's trying to get his hair cut. He's going to the market, and some kid stands in his way or something. And
Why don't, do you want you kids want your mummy? Is that what you want? Where's your mummy? Here's your mummy. Zoo. That's what I'm doing, dude. Grumpy old wizard. I love it.
That is you, the grumpy old wizard.
I am.
Yeah, you know, it was pointed out that the Chamberlain of Australia is not on today, so hopefully he's doing well. They've had a tough go the last few months with fires and all kinds of craziness. All right, so we're ready to do Have You Ever Done a Gnome Illusionist?
Okay, all right. So this is our segment where you get... Did it?
I said, have you ever done a gnome illusionist? That came out wrong. So.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I need to change my answer then. So what's the question?
Have you ever been a gnome illusionist? Is what I was trying to say.
Right. Okay. So this is our segment where you get to show your abilities as a gnome illusionist.
Yeah, and I'm almost dead.
Fighter. I'm sorry.
I'm almost dead.
Yes. Have you ever played a gnome fighter illusionist trying to save your village? This, of course, is by our good friend Kelly Villamere and his First Encounter magazine. And if I recall last time, you were almost killed by an Umber Hulk.
Yep.
And so here we go. So the Umber Hulk has been dispatched with. All right, hang on. Let me get to...
Get to the page.
Sorry, I had this all. Okay, all right. So, all right. You continue on your mission.
Yes.
When up ahead, through the corridor, you see another large chamber. In the chamber, dead bodies and skeleton bones are seen throughout the room. You notice that the dead bodies are those of Garth's party. Remember, Garth was the one who went out there, who actually killed Maximus. Maximus. Didn't get the clay golem.
Right.
Was it clay golem?
Yes.
Type of golem.
Clay golem. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. And he came back, but a lot of his party members died. So we're seeing the remains. When all of a sudden the skeletons pop up to life. It's 5 against 1. Oh, come on, Maximus was a illusionist. Don't metagame here. So. When I'm not metagaming, I'm helping others. Actually.
Okay.
That's not metagaming, right? We knew that information, right?
That's true. That's true. But,
right? That was in game.
But if you're playing the game and you're trying to win, you shouldn't be giving
sharing information.
That's right.
Now I'm lawful. I cooperate.
Okay.
I'm lawful neutral. We cooperate. All right. H1. Will you, H1. H1N1. Quickly cast a blur spell on self, then attack them with a dagger in one hand, sword in the other. H2. Cast invisibility, then run past quickly with sword. Well, that's an interesting one, right? Because that you need to know if invisibility works on undead. 3, cast improved phantasmal force of giant holy symbol, and then turn them holding dagger ready. That's pretty entertaining.
Yeah.
I never thought about
You
being an illusionist and doing that would be an interesting one. How would you play that, James?
Well, I'm going to wait till it's over.
And then we'll talk about that one. H4, attack immediately with silver dagger. H5, change self into halfling form. Then attack with mace. I don't understand that. H6, attack immediately with mace. H7, attack immediately with sword. H8, cast color spray on them. Then attack with mace.
Those are our choices?
So, that's the 8 choices. Oh, there was one. Oh, so in other words, you think there's one that you wanted to do that wasn't there.
I thought, like you, dispel illusion. Because to your point, why are there undead here if it's an illusionist?
Right. Now, it is Garth's party, though I guess he could cast an illusion on it, right? Can you do illusions perpetual? Well, we digress. Okay. So
what's the difference between 5 and 6? Because one was attack with mace, another one was attack with mace? What?
Yeah, 6 was mace, 7 was sword. It's just different weapons.
And what about 4?
So
5 was what again?
5 is change self into halfling form.
Halfling.
Then attack with mace. So does that mean there's like less damage because I'm small?
Yeah.
So 1 is blur spell. And then attack. 2 is invisibility, run past. 3 is improved phantasmal force of the giant holy symbol, which I hope someone picks.
I'm picking that.
That's awesome. You really do want to go down, don't you? You're like that dude in the toad.
That's right.
You've given up. I'm doing invisibility. I think I think undead.
What's number 2?
I mean, they don't actually have eyeballs, but clearly they have to see, or do they sense? 2 is invisibility. Okay. I'm going to go with invisibility.
Okay, so Dan
run past.
Dan is going for 2. I'm going for 3. So your choices are blur, invisibility, turn undead. What's number 4?
Attack with silver dagger.
Dagger. 5 is change self to halfling attack. 6 is mace and attack. 7 is sword and attack. 8 is color spray.
Yeah, a color spray seems like I would think a pretty good idea. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's only limited to certain creatures, right?
And yes, they're skeletons as far as we can tell.
Here's the good news: is I can't give away anything because I don't know anything.
In general, or just specific to this? That's the question.
Basically, in general.
2. Brian chooses 2. Okay.
I'm doing 2. All right, Brian, we're doing it together. So Brian and I we're locking arms, declaring invisibility. And running past.
Menion uses the mace, which is a fine choice.
Okay. Certainly a
Cyber Heston chooses the mace.
He's playing very conservative, which is not a bad thing to do.
Yeah, but this is a good discussion because I have my bias here, and but go ahead. So I think that's it. Those are the ones. Anyone else? You give them.
Everyone else is out.
Everyone else is.
Carlos announced the frog deity, and he's out.
No. Mace is 6. Yes. Cyber Heston chooses 2, not 6.
Oh, we got a lot of 2s.
Go ahead. Okay.
All right. Turning and flipping. To the back. H. All right. H1, which was the blur spell. Blur spell has no. Oh, this doesn't sound good. Blur spell has no effect on undead.
Yes.
Do we know that?
Yes.
Oh, we do. Wow.
Which is good.
Okay.
I actually feel better about my choice because it's so ridiculous. So I'm glad. That's good. Go ahead. Keep going.
Okay. 8. It'd be an awesome way to die, wouldn't it? Remember that time James did a illusion of
That's right.
Of a holy symbol? Okay. H2. It works. No damage. We are through. 3 of us are through. H3. Which one was this?
That was the turn undead, right? Phantasmal Force, I hope.
That's you, right?
Yeah.
Spell doesn't work on undead. Plus, you're not a cleric. Take 10 hit points of damage in the melee.
I think I'm dead at this point.
Yeah, how many did you take last time?
I've taken 20. Well, we have 51 hit points. I've taken
50.
50. I've taken 20, 17, and 10, so I have 3 hit points left.
Excellent. H4. Destroy them, but take 8 hit points of damage from the fight. What was 5?
Halfling, change to a halfling and attack. Why you would do that?
Spell doesn't matter to creatures. Take 3 hit points of damage.
But that's still, you took 3. That's pretty good.
Yeah. What was 6? Oh, 6 is the mace.
Yep.
Great choice. Take 1 hit point damage from the fight. Why does Kelly say that they made a great choice when I didn't take, all of us tours didn't take any damage, and he didn't say great choice?
Right.
Okay. 7, destroy them, but take 4 hit points of damage. 8, spell has no effect. Take 3 hit points of damage. So if I understand it correctly, if I'm doing the math right, you have made the worst choice.
That's right. And I like how different spells have well, I'm channeling what would Dan do, Rule of Cool and this.
You are.
That's right.
You are. This is a terrible way to, no wonder I'm a terrible player.
I've mastered. It only took 2 or 3 weeks to go, okay, let me get this straight. Now we go to a more prescient point. I would not, if I was the DM, I would say invisibility doesn't work on undead. Because invisibility, just like he says, invisibility, a level 2 spell, magic user.
And are you trying to teach me a lesson by picking what would be cool to show me now, like how I am terrible?
Sir, you're an old man. I'm not here to teach you anything. I'm just showing what it feels like when you have these things. And I
think you're trying to teach me a lesson. You were doing so well. You were like, look, Dan's doing terrible. I'm doing great. Yeah. Even playing Dan's favorite character class.
That's right.
And race, I need to teach him a lesson. Let me see if he gets this. All right, where's invisibility?
So invisibility is page 70. It's an illusion phantasm. As Menyon has said, it says, mind-affecting spells such as illusions are pointless against undead. So why does this illusion work when the other ones didn't work?
Okay, well, wait, well, I'm sure that's correct, but how do we get there? So how do we know this? Because this is probably a big issue, right? If you're an illusionist, whether or not your illusions work on undead is a matter of significance to you, right? Because if the DM says they don't, everyone's booing. So you're the illusionist going. And look, I remember this because I think when I was going through, Teagle Manor at a convention, and I was like, I don't think I want to pick an illusionist because I'm suspicious that they're not going to work on undead. And I think the DM was like, yeah, that's right. So how do we, is there a definition of what an illusion or a phantasm is?
Right. So what we're hearing on the chat, because what's interesting, and our friend Carlos is on, which again, I should not be shaming him with just calling him Carlos. The Immaculate Emulator, of course, of Cleveland, has said that in the book that shall not be named, there is a spell, invisibility to undead.
Oh, okay.
Which then implies if you need an invisibility to undead spell, you need that because the other one doesn't work.
You would have thought that would have come up on a Sage Advice, though I don't remember it in a Sage Advice. So.
Even though it is an illusion phantasm, so that's on page 33 of the book that shall not be named.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
Right.
Okay.
So I have always found it, and we did talk about this one time. I have generally ruled that illusions, and it depends on the creature. Mindless creatures, they don't have a mind, is the idea, because these are skeletons.
Oh.
They're.
Oh, so like if you look, so like what's the, so is it just non? So like if you look at skeleton, their intelligence is non. So, but they can recognize things. They see, don't they?
Well, the question is, how do they? Are they sensing life? Does invisibility? This goes back to what invisibility does. The idea is, invisibility is a mental trick on sentient creatures that you're not really invisible. It's just we've blinded the person mentally that you can't see the thing.
Okay, well, what about something like a mummy? A mummy has low intelligence. It's not. A lich is extremely intelligent.
Right.
So some undead are intelligent, right?
Right. I generally say, at least at a minimum, mindless undead, they are immune to it. Then you take what you read in the monster manual of various creatures like ghoul and this and that, many of them are immune to illusion spells, they say, if I remember correctly. Maybe ghoul may not be a good example, but you'd have to look up in each of the individual. So it's this cobbled together of, well, this affects them and this doesn't affect them. So that's how we end up with this. But I typically say undead, mindless creatures are not affected by illusions because they're mindless.
So is it fair to say that it's a DM's? It sounds like we don't have an official answer. It's a DM's call. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it's a DM's call, but I think you do have to decide. Again, a lich. Now, lich is an interesting one because you said it's super intelligent, but they are undead. So does that count? Well, it would depend on the spell. So
zombies are non. What are the two nons? I think skeletons and zombies, probably, right?
But like, for instance, following spells have no effect on liches: charm, sleep, enfeeblement, polymorph, cold, insanity, death spells, which makes sense. But I've generally said that's right. They're very, very concerned about the mummy. But yeah, so your argument of the mummy, could you be invisible to that? I would say the book that shall not be named, I would use that. But if you didn't have the book that shall not be named, then you'd have to say, well, does the spell make sense when it comes to a specific undead creature?
Well, yeah, because invisibility is an illusion. That's interesting. I hadn't really thought of invisibility as an illusion. I thought I actually go invisible.
No.
You know what I mean? I actually am invisible. So I would have thought that. So there's an argument that invisibility is not going to work against mindless creatures because it's an illusion. Certain
mindless creatures. Yeah, if it's mindless, not
certain mindless.
Well, not it doesn't. If it has visual. What I'm saying is a zombie doesn't have, they may have eyes, but that's not how they're seeing things. The magic force is they're detecting life force. That's how which would make them a better guard. The idea is they're guarding old temples, and instead of trying to figure out light, they sense the life presence, and that's how they're attacking.
They certainly, so if a sword is swinging, do they know it's a sword, right?
I don't know if that matters to them. They're typically, you kill the person, you point to the life force, and you're commanded, and that's how it goes there. So it doesn't.
Yeah, but what's interesting is can't you order a mummy to open doors?
A mummy? Well, mummy's low intelligence.
Oh, not a mummy. I'm sorry. Can't you order zombies and skeletons to open doors?
Yeah, we went back and forth on that, didn't we? We wanted to say it could do a bunch of things. I thought we started like with torches. We kind of have them hold the torch, but we kind of wrapped. I remember that one time we put the torch in the rib cage.
Right.
I don't think we actually had them hold it. Now,
because
go ahead.
Okay, ahead.
I was just
saying that in the city state of the Invincible Overlord, of course, there's right. So there's one establishment that has, and that's Gonzo, but there's one establishment that has skeletons as servers.
Right. Well,
Bob.
Yeah, it makes it very complicated. So if you do argue that they're more intelligent, then, like I said, the spell causes the recipient to vanish from sight and not detectable by normal vision or even infravision. That's what it says.
Oh, that's right. So normal vision, it says by normal vision or infravision. So the argument is, so now it's a vision thing.
Yes.
Like a bat. Invisibility is not going to protect you against a giant bat, is it?
Potentially, you could say it doesn't have anything. If they don't use eyes, then they can be seen.
Right.
And that's why the intelligence is important against detect invisibility. Because the more intelligent you are, the trick that the spell is doing to your brain to prevent you from seeing it, you have a chance to change it.
So in other words, it's the best thing to be is have no intelligence.
Right.
The next best thing is to be extremely intelligent.
Super intelligent or super high level.
The worst thing is to be stupid.
Right. Well, that's what.
It's better to be not intelligent at all than stupid.
Yeah,
Okay.
the dumb suffer. Exactly. But
Okay.
that's where. So that's why if in my in we've had this. If any invisibility, charm, illusions against undead, many of the undead, is not going to work unless they are like Now vampires are immune to charm, but some illusions I would say would work against them because they're basically, undead humans at this point, unless it was an undead, vampire drow or something like that, and then they would have their magic resistance.
Oh, right. Okay.
And here is where a good DM working with the party, there is the tradition of the players, kind of talking their plans outside the DM and then springing it on the DM. It's better that they say, hey, do we know that invisibility would work against undead? And you'd say, that should be a pretty common understanding, unless this is a super unique undead. And you would have that conversation so people wouldn't spring their plan and you go, aha, the skeletons attack you.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So skeletons and zombies really are quite different, as potentially quite different as a result of their non-intelligence as opposed to even low intelligence. But yeah, you're right. I mean, so I guess if you're going to have an illusionist in the party, you need to have a conversation about the use of illusions and have conversations like this, I guess, at the beginning of your campaign, so no one is unhappy that they picked illusionist. So that would stay. So if you're an illusionist and you're going into well, I guess the good news is if you can use it against undead that have minds, I guess it can help you in a haunted house style adventure.
Sure.
As long as it's not skeletons and then it could be quite effective because the stupid mummy, now all of a sudden you're quite effective.
Right.
Right? Because the mummy's low intelligence, they're probably going to fall for it. Right? And so now it's quite effective.
And it's the same reason why people use carnivorous apes and dogs to guard, because even though the invisibility works against their eyes, they have keen smell. And so, like ghouls, they have a lot of times they have keen smell.
Right.
Yes, you seem to be asking a lot of questions to protect your gnome illusionist from being actually useful. So that's what people are saying on the chat. Like you're very concerned about the efficacy of that. But we talked about this with illusionists. If you have a DM who's going to shut down all this, to me, the illusionist against humans, very powerful because you're messing with people's minds. Against other things like the druid. Druids are great in nature. Anywhere else, not so much. If you want to be a best overall, magic user would be the best because they have a wide variety of spells that they can affect. All right, that was good. That was a great segue. Have you ever been a gnome illusionist? And I'm 3 points from death. So at that point, I don't have to play this anymore. So that's great. Well, actually, Kelly Villamere was very prescient. He said that it gets harder as it goes on. So perhaps, it's not that I'm showing you some. Perhaps you were rope-a-doping. And
I'm rising to the occasion. Maybe I rise to the challenge.
That's right. You were just pretending that you didn't know what you were doing, just so I could get a false sense of security.
I'm a hustler.
You did. You shanked. Yeah, I've been bamboozled. I didn't
shank you.
I've been hoodwinked. Exactly.
Yes, you have.
All right. So the next one we have is today we're looking back to go forward, as our friends on the Grognard's file say. We're open boxing White Dwarf number 18, which is, why is White Dwarf number 18 so important, Dan?
Well, it's important to me because it, of course, has Albie Fiore's classic adventure, The Halls of Tizenthane, his second mini adventure published in White Dwarf magazine. The first one was The Lich Way. And I know a lot of people like The Lich Way better than Halls of Tizenthane, but there's a lot who go the opposite way. I'm one of those. And I thought it's a good, I liked this edition of White Dwarf magazine, not just because it had The Halls of Tizenthane, but it had some good charts in there too. It had a weather chart in there that I use. I like that weather chart better than the weather chart that was done for Greyhawk. I'm sure, Jen, I know you're familiar with the weather chart for Greyhawk, which is nice. I'm a big fan of random weather charts, but my experience with the Greyhawk one is it's complicated. It takes a long time. You got to do the adjustments to what your longitude or latitude. Whereas the one in White Dwarf was just a lot simpler. So I liked the weather chart in there quite well.
Oh.
And are you?
Yep, I put it
pulling it up
for the folks. I'm going to shrink this down. So White Dwarf number 18 has the Star Trek Enterprise, the motion picture miniatures scenario, and of course the Halls of Tiz and Thane. A D&D mini module. So there you go. Which again we will be running next Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, so scrolling up, there's a advertisement for a Model Workshop Limited in Surrey. I wonder if they're still there. A bunch of stuff, advertisements. Then what I found interesting was a announcement that the Game Wizards have arrived in the UK, directed by Don Turnbull. The company will be opening for business March 31st, 1980.
What's the game? The Game Wizards. So it's a
TSR. TSR UK is starting.
Oh, TSR UK.
Yes.
Okay.
They announced they had a one-page ad, page 4. Importers and distributors of D&D, AD&D, and other fine TSR products from all leading games, hobby stores, trade inquiries welcome. So there you go.
And that's Imagine Magazine, I think, was TSR, if I recall,
that's correct.
wasn't it?
Yep.
Because White Dwarf is not TSR associated, right? It's Games Workshop.
That's
right?
Exactly. I think it started that way and then moved forward. And it's interesting how they called "Are You Role Playing" the next one. Are you role playing instead of role playing? ROLL versus ROLE. Tunnels and Trolls is the answer, and I've played a little Tunnels and Trolls. It's pretty fun. I never got into it as much as some folks, but it's a fun game. Especially, it was a lot easier to play solo games.
Is it what makes it more fun? If you recall, is it more streamlined? Were these competitors that were meant to be easier?
Yes.
Than all of Okay.
If you've listened to interviews with Ken St. Andrew, he basically said, I really wanted to like D&D, but it was a convoluted mess, so I just made my own, which was because he didn't have, and it sounded like he didn't have the the pedigree of the wargaming, and he wasn't married to that, and he really was starting with a fantasy game, but it was a little gonzo, which some people didn't like, whereas D&D tended to be a little more serious. But the mechanics were pretty easy. Yeah, so, and for solo adventures, it's really good. You basically choose your own adventure, and then the combat is, you have a number of dice versus a number of dice, and you basically, it's a pretty simple mechanic. All right, keep moving forward. There's Star Trek the Motion Picture miniature figures, now features. So Ian Livingstone and his editor's page, he kind of talks about role-playing games in general, but the star of this, I don't really care about the Star Trek motion picture scenario. I didn't care, so I didn't even read it. The star of the show, of course, is, let me go to, then there's Open Box, Darkover, The Ages of Chaos. Never played that.
Never heard of that.
Got a 9 from John Olson. That's great. And then Sword Quest only got a 6. And Drachne Station, that's Judges Guild, got an 8 from Bob McWilliams. So now I'm on page 14, The Halls of Tiz and Thane. So Dan, I'm not going to show this because it's a spoiler alert, but what made The Halls of Tiz and Thane good in your opinion, or great?
Yeah, so I'd always heard that it was a very good adventure, and I didn't consider it to be a great adventure till I ran it. Don't you agree that you don't know how good an adventure is, I think, until you run it. It's kind of like seeing a recipe, right? It may look good, but until you make it. And I think a lot of it depends on, do you have a good group of players playing too, will influence whether you think it's a great game. But I think it's a great adventure because I just think there's a lot of interesting characters in it, a lot of interesting NPCs. I think that what's great about what Albie did was he put in enough detail to make it easy to run, but included a lot of gaps in there that you could fill in. And so to me, it hit the sweet spot of you're not having to fill in too much, but there's enough in there to fill in. And what I liked about it was just different. It wasn't a dungeon crawl, it was, and this was the era of dungeon crawls, wasn't it? I mean, we're talking 1980.
That's right.
Right. I mean, so it's an adventure in the halls of Tizen Thane, in his palace. Everything takes place there. And there's just a lot of different ways the adventure can go. It's as you well know, it's anything but linear, right? So as the DM, when you're running this thing, it's not, the party gets a choice to do whatever they want. If you think about it, isn't the halls of Tizen Thane in some respect is sort of like a sandbox of a mansion? It's a mansion, but it's a sandbox. So you can go different places in the mansion, meet different people, and things will develop very differently. And so that's what I thought made it brilliant, was all the different possibilities that no single game would be the same. So it's quite deadly.
Yes.
A quite deadly adventure. Yeah, and it's a mystery, which is fun too, right? It's sort of solving a mystery. So I don't know. To me, it had, it was a little bit like Cthulhu meets D&D. I mean, the stuff I love about Call of Cthulhu, the mystery solving, the intrigue, plus D&D, and so yeah, that's why I liked it.
Yeah, and I've never run it. I've played in Dan's game, so I only have one version of it going through it. It's short, which is great. There's enough for you to run it. You still need to be comfortable as a DM. It certainly is not a beginning DM thing. It's for low-level characters, but yet, like you said, it's very deadly. If you fight everything, you'll probably be dead. And there's a lot of role-playing. It really has it tries to do the three pillars that a lot of people talk about now: exploration, role-playing, and combat. It's not just all combat. You just knock down doors and kill people, or kill orcs or whatever. If you do that, your party's going to be very sad. And there's some choices that you have to make as a party which are not very clear. There's no, this is the right thing you have to do. I didn't recall that from my time there. It wasn't like, if we do this, we get the cookie. There is the lesser, it seems like there was always the lesser of two evils kind of choices. Like you have to choose, the Rojos or the Baxters or something to that effect with this. You have to choose one path or another path. And there may be a third path, but when we went through it, and both didn't seem like they were great choices. It's not like Save the Fair Maiden or Align with the Dragon. It's not, it wasn't very binary. So if you like those kind of things, I definitely think it would be good to run. Okay. And it's short. People, don't look at it yet. Spoilers, because we're going to do it next week. But then after that, why don't you get your hands on it and run it for yourself? Would you?
And it's low level,
right?
Which is nice. I like low level adventures.
Yeah, it's easier to manage. So the next page 20 has tables. So you have random tables for stuff, right? Who doesn't like tables?
I liked. Well, yeah, and I loved it. So I like that page.
If you don't know, if someone says, "Hey, what hand is this person right-handed or not?" This person
that should be used. Yeah. We never roll to see if you're left-handed, right-handed, ambidextrous. You got a chart for that. That should be used.
Well, shout out to the Captain General Brian. He asks when you start your game, are you right-handed or left-handed? He wants to know what shield hand you have if you're carrying a shield. Right. So he allows you the choice, but I guess I should try to do ambidextrous next time. See if he'll let me.
Well, so I would make you roll on that chart that you're looking at.
Right. Exactly, on page 20. Then there's a weather chart. Greyhawk has weather, there's lots of weather, but if you want a different weather chart, there you go.
I prefer that one. I like that one. It's simpler, and the weather tends to be nastier more often, which I like as well. So that's my weather chart of choice. That's the weather chart I use.
All right. So heritage, I know the book that shall not be named has, social class, social status. Here they have, you roll 3d6, and generally it skews to doing pretty well. So
I rolled a 7.
So you're
I?
a cavalier. That's what it says.
Okay. Not
the
character class,
cavalier, correct?
Right, because it didn't exist yet.
Or a chevalier. Is that how you say it in French?
Beats me.
I don't know. No paupers enslaved, though pennants should be allowed elementary articles of survivals. There you go.
And what I like about that chart is you roll that before you roll your money because it adjusts the starting money, if I recall correctly. I kind of like that chart.
Multiplier for initial funds. So if you were to roll an 18, you'd have 200 times your initial funds. Why are you adventuring?
That's right. You should be retired.
I have 4,000.
Because you got to stay moving. I'm a target if I'm just in town. Are you kidding me?
That's right. Oh, that's horrible. The next one is more useless items. So
what do I need to roll?
D100.
Okay, tell me what useless item. So I rolled a 26. 26.
You get burnt toast.
Is this like dungeon dressing?
I guess so.
See, then the players are going to freak out because like someone was just here.
That's right. There's burnt toast. How long has it been here?
There's burnt toast. All right.
Well, we've talked about that dungeon dressing. You have to be careful with it because if you put candles and this and that, people start. I touch the candle, I move the candle, and you got to be. It sounds great, but too much detail can backfire if you're not careful. Next is non-player character. Non-player character. So roll D100 again. He has a number of pre-gen characters ready for discussion.
58.
58. His name is Hector. He's a human cleric.
Hector the cleric.
I'm Hector the cleric.
Okay.
He has 15 gold pieces. Well, now I guess you should roll 3d6 to see if he's a prince. Let's see if we can do some fun math.
I rolled a 16.
He gets 10. He's a knight title. He's the Sir Hector, cleric.
Sir Hector.
Human cleric, and he has 10 times his gold, so that's 150 gold. Nice. That's awesome.
So obviously we're going to rob him.
We see him and we rob him. Exactly.
I'm doing monster summoning.
That's right. Monster summoning. Please send in the mummy.
Attack that dude.
Next is the Fiend Factory, which again, the Mandrake people and the Hound Keranos. Well, go ahead.
They're all from. If you notice it, they're all from literature. So that's what it is. They're creatures from
sci-fi books.
From books. Yeah. So none of them were like jumping out at me as like, yeah, I want to use this creature.
Yeah. The Fung. I'm the Fung. That's interesting.
Well, which is the one that has the big praying mantis head?
Yeah, that's a big praying. That's it.
And he follows you around. He just scares. He prefers to scare you instead of killing you. So he just shows up everywhere. You're like sitting in school. Yeah, and you see looking through the window a praying. That was the one that I could see. Okay, I guess that would be mildly entertaining to use. You get it on a random roll. You're like, oh, it's all right. It's gonna follow the party around. That would be kind of creepy, I guess, right? Not bad. The Fung.
Yeah.
Okay.
Comments. Not every DM's monster, but I cert for those who enjoy an opportunity to terrify their adventurers without actually killing them off. Incidentally, don't forget to roll for the morale of hirelings, especially if they start disappearing one by one. It's from a Jack Vance book, yeah.
Who wouldn't want? I mean, what DM is that not their monster?
Right. So you have to kind of figure. I just think they would. My players that I'm in my current, they would just attack everyone.
Yes. It's hard to terrify player characters nowadays, isn't it? Like maybe when it's their first like if it's their first game ever, it's a 12-year-old kid that's working, right? Yeah, now it's like, they're like, that's the Fung from White Dwarf, number 18.
Well, not only that, it's even when they know, even if they don't know it is, if you try to telegraph, like in 2 adventures, the last adventure, I set up this area, just in case one of my folks are listening, where it's clear that they have this room. If they go into this room, this white, their first level, comes out and attacks them. that should tell them, hey, we should probably not go in there. They're like, okay, well, we've got one magic weapon. If I get hit, then you take the weapon. I'm like, what are you doing? You don't have to go in here.
Do you know that was you? You did that? Do you know what I would do if my DM put a white in a first level adventure? You know what I would do to the DM?
You'd punch me in the face.
I'd punch you in the nose. Exactly right.
Exactly.
Because that's what I've been told to do.
That's right.
By the internet.
And I've done that deliberately.
By the Dragon's Foot crowd.
I've done it deliberately, and because I, like Gary, have I have no problem with it. But I also made it pretty clear you can avoid this room. But they're like, oh well, we've got to go.
That's right.
Well, Menyon mentioned B1. B1 has one. B2 has one. Village of I don't know if Village of Hamla has one. Curse of the Reptile God has one. It's not unusual, but instead of running away, the players are like, "Oh, let's figure out a way to kill it." It's like so.
Well, what is it? Is it like Jim Ward says? I don't kill you.
That's right.
I don't kill characters. Characters kill themselves.
Yeah, and Carlos is like, "Good thing we play online. You can't punch them over Zoom." So there you go.
That's right. This is my preferred method now.
That's right. They can't assault you anymore. So the Fung is interesting, but I think they would just attack him.
But then it's like the coronavirus comes to an end. It's like, get him. There's that DM. He put the white in the low-level adventure. Get him.
That's right. Kill him. All right. So hey, Jonathan's on, by the way. So we should probably segue.
Jonathan. Oh, yes.
So let's segue.
The surprise. Is it time for?
Yeah. So the rest of the White Dwarf, interesting. If you're doing miniatures, that's great. And I do like the old, what people were looking at in England in that time frame. They've got miniatures and stuff like the DM, and then Top Secret at the back. Okay, very good. That
is it time for mail call?
I think it is. I think it is time for mail call.
A new segment where we will answer and or discuss viewer mail.
Viewer comments from the interwebs that we've gotten. And let me see where my mouse is. Because in a few minutes, we're going to have on Lou Pulsipher, which will be super exciting. So let's start from surprise clarification since Jonathan is on. So take it away, Dan.
Yeah, so Jonathan was very kind to solve a puzzle that I had struggled with for a long time. As listeners will know, the surprise example in the DMG, the chart, was it page 62, I think?
Correct.
Has driven me crazy because I've maintained that there's a typo in the chart. That if you look on page 62, top left. A surprise roll of 2, if you're surprised on a 1 to 2, a surprise roll of 2 is worse than a roll of 1. Yes, I know a 3 is better than a 2, right. But if you're surprised, a higher roll is worse because you are surprised by the number of segments on your surprise roll. And what drove me crazy was that it says on a party die of 1 and a monster die of 2, it said the party was surprised, and a party die of 2 and a monster roll of 1, the monster was surprised. Right. And that did not jive with what they were saying. It should have been the opposite.
Correct.
And so Jonathan sent us a message. He looked into this.
And spent a considerable amount of money, apparently, to verify this.
Yes, because he bought the DMG, and apparently he bought a DMG before.
First print one.
Right? Yeah, because we have the one where they've incorporated the errata. And what Jonathan pointed out, which was very helpful, is there was a chart in the player's handbook on surprise on page 103, which the chart on page 62 was modeled after. And the player's handbook one has it right. If you look on page 103 of the player's handbook, and the reason why the DMG apparently ends up changing this is because they were using an example of a surprise of 1 and 4 for one side and 1 to 2 for the other, and that was a little complicated. Right. But so they've got it right in the player's handbook. Gary does, right? So parties die as a 1 and a monster roll of 2 to 4, and this is where the party was surprising 1 to 4, which is interesting because the player's handbook there is showing you that you can give the party a surprise of 1 to 4 if the circumstances suggest it, right? Yes. You don't have to be anything special. And so that made it quite clear that the monster was surprised, because the monster was surprised on a 2 to 4, on a 1 to 4. And when they roll a 2 to 4, that's higher than the surprise roll for the party. And then when it's a party die is 2 and the monster is a 1, then it is the party surprise. That makes sense. It got switched around. So apparently, the first DMG, if I recall correctly, Jonathan said, because I don't have the very first edition of the DMG, it copied the player's handbook chart, so it was everything's fine. Then they do an errata.
Yep.
And they do the errata to make it a 1 to 2 instead of 1 to 4 chance, but they screw it up.
Yep.
Right?
The errata needs errata.
Exactly. The errata, somebody screwed up the errata, and then when they do the new issues of the DMG, they simply do a cut and paste job of the errata, which got it wrong.
Correct.
And so, good. And I think, Jonathan seems to be in agreement with me, and I think with you too at this point, that the DMG is wrong. The player's handbook is the one to use. It's got it right.
But, typically we say the newer books supersede the other books.
Oh, no. You can't. Why? Oh, no. What are you saying? It's wrong.
I know, but that's...
I'm gonna punch you in the nose. How can I...
Yeah.
It was going so well.
Well, I'm just saying that's the that's the precedent, right? And that...
No, wrong. No, later wrong should not... Look, this happens sometimes, right? No, I'm not even going there. You're upsetting me now. I'm angry gnome. I think it's been solved. Now, what happens is, this is interesting. I'll find this. We have to do another entire show on surprise.
Oh.
Which I think we should do simply because I want to call it the surprise episode.
Yes.
Is that I believe polyhedron, let's make things really complicated. Polyhedron, which claimed to be official, I believe gives an example of surprise, and it does what I think some people do. I think Carlos may do this. A lot of people do this, and I know it's a matter of contention. They do the difference between the rolls.
Right.
So if the surprise roll is a 6 to 1, it's 5. Even my position is it's only if both parties are surprised do you do the difference.
Right.
But polyhedron, which is official, follows the other so I guess it's do whatever you want to do.
Because you can turn me from, I used to do it the way Carlos did it, and then your passionate argument about this thing that no one really cares about convinced me that should only be if it's simultaneous surprise. So there you go.
Because look, if you do it the way that where it is always the difference, even if one party is not surprised, what's happening then is that that is massively deadly. Right? Because if you roll the 1 and you're surprised, and the other side rolls a 6 and they're not surprised, that's 5 segments of surprise. That's you're done. Yeah. You're that dude in the frog, right? I mean, that's why he looks that way, because he's surprised for 5. So he isn't even moving for 5 segments. Can I move now? Can I do anything?
No.
Not a thing.
And if the other people had their missiles notched and spells readied, and they shot everything out there. So okay, well again, thank you to Jonathan for spending hundreds of dollars to help us figure that out. So wonderful.
That was well worth it. Thank you, Jonathan.
So if any of our other patrons, or if you don't want that, you can just send us your first printings of DMG, softcover monster manuals and players' handbooks from the UK. We'll take it all.
Jonathan, actually, we're going to need that for evidence, aren't we?
That's right.
We put it in the evidence bin or whatever. So just send that to GROGTALK.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, it'll be put here in a place of honor. We would put it there. That's not a problem.
On loan, we'll have like a little thing like they have at the museums. Right. On loan from the collection of Jonathan Becker.
That's right. So thank you. Let's see. We got time for one more thing, and then we're going to get...
doppelgangers?
Yeah, doppelgangers. So another person asked about the doppelganger. Maybe a photo from yourself. I guess that's almost as good.
No, I think we're going to need the...
We just need your character sheet and goldenrod saying your will that if you should pass, that we get your first run DMG. That would be fine.
Oh, that'd be hilarious. You know what? I wonder if you could use that as an actual will legally. Like if you had witnesses, use the goldenrod character sheet. Like you put your name on it and all this stuff.
You haven't looked this up before? You haven't put this in your contracts class?
Well, we need to have somebody from the Grog Empire look into this.
Okay.
But all right, so doppelgangers, do they take on the voice? That's the question, right?
Yes, one of our patrons asked, doppelgangers, which are classic monster manual, they assume the form. Do they take the voice of the creature as well? Is the question.
I have a position on this. Do you?
I do as well, but I'd like to hear your position.
You're very polite. Thank you, sir. And I've been heavily influenced by you here.
Oh, okay.
Your method of interpretation, the Jamesian method of interpreting text. The Jamesian method of interpretation, as I understand it, is generally if it doesn't say it, it doesn't happen.
Yes.
And nowhere in this text does it state that you take on the voice. It talks about what you do take on, right? The physical characteristics. So based upon the Jamesian method of interpreting D&D text, my belief is it does not take on the voice.
Yes, I would agree with that. I would argue that if it was, it can try to mimic it, but it would not be an exact replica. And it would only if it had chime to hear the thing. Because it does have ESP, and it can imitate with 90% accuracy. The question is it imitating its mannerisms or is it actually imitating its voice? So.
Oh, so the ESP and imitate, that's sort of what, like mannerisms and things like that? So I would do voice. Yeah, I like that. So what you're saying is 90% chance that if they've heard the person, they can imitate.
Correct.
The voice?
That's right.
I agree. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, so that is the way I read things. If it's not explicitly said, or if there's a example that proves the negative, then then the positive is discounted. Like we talked about with the magic sword, only the sword of sharpness you can turn on and off. So that means other magic swords, the light is always shining if you pull out. This case, because there's ESP and can imitate with 90%, I would basically roll it, and if that it was made, then the mannerisms and the voice are similar enough that they can.
Have you seen the SpongeBob episode where Plankton pretends that he is
Mr. Krabs?
Mr. Krabs?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and he's like, the smoke is popping out of, and like SpongeBob isn't quite sure. It's hilarious, right? Because SpongeBob doesn't know who the real one is, and to anyone it should be obvious. So yeah, that reminded me of the doppelganger not making their 90% roll, right? It's like, I am John.
Right.
It's a totally different voice, right? I am Mary.
Hello. That's right.
I'm Mary.
I'm Dan.
Wait a minute. I'm confused.
I'm Dan. It's the classic, and part of it I think is influenced by like Star Trek, where they have the clone. Those old movies where they have the gun and there's two people. I'm the real person.
Yes.
And you have that situation that you're trying to figure it out. So, and the fact that it's kind of an amorphous creature that mutates, it's a mutable form. Now, if it had time, I'd say if it never heard it before, it may have a little bit bigger problem. But if if they were stalking the prey and heard the person talk, I think it would be, that's right, I'm the Prince of Markovia. That it should have the 90% kind of wraps that in there. Because one of the other tenets of D&D is it's not a simulation, and it uses armor class and percentage to kind of deal with some of these specificities in the role. So the 90% covers all that, and you should not let your characters try to rule lawyer you down, or the DM. It's 90%, it works or it doesn't, and you could use that as an excuse that his voice is not good or something to that. Okay, well, welcome back to Grog Talk, and as you can see, we have a guest in our new panel. So Dan, why don't you introduce who we have us joining us?
Okay, so it's our pleasure today to have Dr. Louis Pulsipher. He is a prolific game designer. He has a website, pulsiphergames.com, which provides supplementary and playtesting material for his games. He also has a game design channel on YouTube. But most importantly for us and for our listeners, he was a prolific contributor to RPG magazines in the late 1970s and the 1980s, most notably White Dwarf and Dragon magazine. By my estimate, close to 100 articles. So, and I like to read them before our guest articles, before we interview them. That would take too much time to have done today. But so, Dr. Pulsipher, welcome to GROGTALK. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And I can see why you'd have trouble reading that much. I'm planning to have 2 books, each about 100,000 words, that'll be reprints of articles plus some new material.
That is great news because, and we'll talk about your articles, because what I absolutely love about your articles is how useful they are to readers. So, and we'll talk about that. We can get into whether it was your teaching background that influenced that style for your articles. But maybe you could start off by telling us, because this is about first edition AD&D, so we love to go way back in time. That'll be our focus. Could you take us back to when you first discovered, I know you were a war gamer, could you take us back to when you first discovered Dungeons and Dragons?
Well, of course, most of the people who played Dungeons and Dragons then were wargamers. I actually corresponded with Gary Gygax in 1966 when I was all of 15 years old as part of the International Federation of War Games. And I remember calling him sir, and he said, "Don't call me sir, I'm not old enough." And he wasn't really at that time. It's a long time ago, obviously. As for Dungeons and Dragons, I lived for a short time in a little village in Bellevue, Michigan. And somebody's mother told my mother and so on that somebody else in town played games. I went and visited him, and he had Dungeons and Dragons. Well, I looked at it, and there were lots of dice. And I said, as I often said then, I hate dice games. I was a diplomacy player at that point. So I didn't take it up at that point. Then in 1975, my brother and I went to a convention. We had a camper that we'd borrowed from our stepfather. And at night, we got a Dungeons and Dragons game going in the camper. The referee got up on top, the part over the cab, and the rest of us sat there and played through much of the night. I don't know if any of us had played before other than the referee. And that was my first Dungeons and Dragons game. And it was kind of strange because the referee liked firebombs. So we'd carry Molotov cocktails around with us, and we'd be in a dungeon and we'd run into like 30 hobgoblins. And we were like 3rd, 4th, 5th level, something like that. I was an elven magic user because I was going to be a magic user. That was always something I knew about Dungeons and Dragons. I was going to be a magic user. So we'd throw firebombs at them and burn them up. And the other thing I remember about that game is the elves had a possibility to see or detect hidden doors. But the referee felt that the elf had to actively do that rather than just have it happen. Well, being a fairly stubborn person, I started saying elf, elf, elf for long extended periods of time until he finally gave up and said, "Okay, we'll just assume that you're always paying attention."
We call it now what, elfing the room.
We elf the room. That's what they call it. Yeah, the elves go around and do it.
We still have that debate, don't we, about even, 40, 50 years later, about whether or not you've got to concentrate for the secret, or is it just the concealed? So, yeah, we haven't answered any of these questions. Did you survive your first adventure?
We survived, and then the question was, how do we get the rules? So we went back home, and we'd been involved in the Michigan Organized Wargamers, which was a war game club in Michigan. I lived in Michigan at the time. And we ran tournaments and so on, and we knew a guy who was distributing game stuff. He wasn't in Grand Rapids, but he was pretty far away. So we organized an expedition, drove up there, bought a copy of the old, I don't know if it was the white box or the brown box, but by then Greyhawk was out. But I don't believe The next supplement may not have been out yet. Anyway, so we picked up a copy and some of those funky dice that are so old, and then went back home, and I refed for my brother, and that was all we had.
Now, where at this point in time, because you graduate, right, in 1973, because and this is going to become relevant because you pursue a PhD.
Yes.
So at Duke.
Yes. So when I went to that convention in 1975, that was summer break from Duke.
Okay. And so at some point in time, I assume the D&D bug bit you, right? Because you'd said that first you weren't all that intrigued with it.
Well, as soon as I played the game and realized what it was, and realized that even though it looks like a dice game, it is not. It's a microcosm of life, and your objective is to avoid having to rely on the dice to succeed, or rely on the dice as seldom as possible, let's say.
And
so it was okay with me, and I was a big fan of fantasy and science fiction.
And when did you start? At some point, I assume you switched to DMing.
Well, I played that first game in 75, and then I was the GM from then on for my brother. And when I went back to Duke that year, I organized a group to play D&D, and I was the initial GM. And then my point of view of groups is you should try to get as many people to GM as possible. So we sort of trained the other guys up to GM, because otherwise the GM never gets to play.
Yep.
I am immensely suspicious of any GM who wants to GM and doesn't want to play. GMing is work. If you want to GM, it's because you want to impose your notions on the game and you want to sort of control the game. And I don't like that at all. Okay. So I am very suspicious of that, and I try to avoid it.
And you were an early reader, obviously, of Dragon Magazine. I noticed that there's a letter of yours that's published. And then, James, the reason why I'm going to bring this up is because Lou is complaining about something we complained about. In a letter in Dragon Magazine number 3, you complain about the fiction that is included. Do you recall it? You complain about the fiction writing that is included. You feel that there is a lot of fiction that one could read, which is going to be a lot better than the fiction being published in Dragon Magazine. Something that James and I have talked about. We weren't fans, but
well, in general, in D&D, there's two ways to go about it. You can play it like a game, or you can play it like a storytelling machine. And back then, because we were war gamers, we tended to play it as a game. Nowadays, it's much more a storytelling machine because so many of the players are not war gamers and may not be gamers at all, except for D&D or other RPGs. And my point of view is, if I want to consume, I hate that word, but that's the only word I can think of. If I want to consume fiction, I'm going to get it from professionals who have been curated. In other words, from people who are writing novels. Why would I care about this Yahoo GM who thinks they're writing a good story and generally isn't? So I object immensely to being dragged around by the nose by some GM who puts me on rails and wants something to happen.
And at some point in time, then you make your way to you do your doctoral work, right? I guess because you're working probably on your dissertation in England, correct?
3 years research. I took a very long time to do my PhD because I'm a slug, and I was in England, and I ended up getting married in England, and so on.
And let's face it, because you were spending a lot of time writing articles for White Dwarf magazine. And so that was going to be the next question: is when did you actually have time to actually do your
designing games as well for Games Workshop?
That's exactly right. You designed, did you not? I believe you designed the first, I want to say, fantasy board game for Games Workshop.
Yes, Valley of the Four Winds.
And that was earlier, right? So I think, I don't have the year on that, maybe like 78 or something.
Well, that's when I was designing it. I think it got published like in 1980. Okay,
so tell us about going over to England, because what I think is interesting is that you're obviously prolific. I mean, I credited to you, I think, 23 articles in Dragon Magazine. But my sense is that my count was probably a lot higher than that for you for White Dwarf. You're actually, it looks like, going to become a contributing editor. Your name is on the masthead. So could you tell us a little bit about what it was like? What was the D&D scene like, so to speak, in England compared to the States, if it was different?
Well, there weren't so many people who had heard of it because it was an import from America. And so they got started later, in effect. Games Workshop was had the license, I suppose you could say, in England at that time, or in the United Kingdom, for Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, at one point, they were supposed to do a supplement, and I was writing the supplement. The supplements used to come out. And I was writing the supplement, and then they lost their license. And that was the end of that. I don't remember. I tried to think last night. I don't remember how I met them. However, there was a game shop in London, and there were very few game shops. And they had announcement boards up and so on and so forth. And somehow I got in touch with Albie Fiore, who was the editor of Games Magazine, which was a prominent magazine at the time. And through him, I got to know Graham Levin. And my very first game that I designed, which was Swords and Wizardry, it was a variation with considerable changes from Stratego. And through Albie, I got to know the Games Workshop guys. And they were starting the magazine, and I was writing things on an little old typewriter that I'd bought. And from there, it just sort of grew. Like, for example, they were in charge of the Fiend Folio at the time. The Fiend Folio was done in Britain, not in the United States. And Don Turnbull was the ultimate editor of that, who then later got the D&D license from took it away from Games Workshop. I don't know the details of that. But I had submitted some monsters for White Dwarf. And one day when I was in the shop, Ian or Steve said, "Can we use these monsters in the Fiend Folio?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I guess as long as I get a free copy." And that's how the Archermentals, the Elemental Princes of Evil, and some other monsters of mine got into the Fiend Folio.
Oh, wait, we need to know them all. Can you tell? We've got.
Well, I think, yeah, the Elemental Princes of Evil are the ones that have taken on a life of their own, and there's even
wonderful.
There's even an entry in Wikipedia, Archermentals, for them. And I ran into one once as a player, and I hate running into my own monsters. He was much tougher than we were, so we grabbed what we needed to grab, and we hit the road really fast. But
the irony.
There's also poltergeists, perhaps. Giant bats. I don't know if it was giant bats or something else, but whatever it was, one of my characters lost an eye to one in a game, so that was also very annoying since it was my monster. I think if you look at the index.
Does it? Yeah, are you credited yet? So Poltergeist is in here. Obviously, giant bats are in here. So are you?
Elemental Princes of Evil. I'm not sure there were any others.
Okay. So were you? I wonder if you were credited in here.
I think my name is in there somewhere, maybe in the index.
Okay.
So what we need to do is like a family feud. The top 10 Lou Pulsipher monsters from Fiend Folio, and then we could try to guess, because I'm sure that that'd only take 3 hours to figure out which ones is which. That would be amazing.
And James, didn't we just use the elemental? Did we use the elemental princes in one of our adventures?
Yes,
didn't we?
I think we thought about.
What was because you mentioned it, and I didn't want to not ask you about it. The supplement that you were thinking of doing, that Games Workshop was working on, was that going to be a supplement to original D&D? Because we're talking late 70s, I assume, at this point in time. So first edition is coming out, right?
It was still a supplement to original D&D, as far as I can remember. Just like Greyhawk and not Enchanted Labyrinth, or the Demon one, and so on. It was going to be a paperback book of that size.
Okay. So you obviously, it sounds like you spent time at Games Workshop, right? When it opened up, and their store that they had in London?
I visited them periodically. I couldn't say how often. Um, so, I got to know them well enough to know that Ian was the marketing guy and the business person, and Steve was the guy who just worked and worked and worked, and he was kind of the foundation of the whole business as far as I'm concerned.
Could you tell us, and I don't, obviously this is about you today, but we just went through White Dwarf magazine number 18, which has my all-time favorite adventure, which is Albie's Halls of Tiz and Thane. And sadly, of course, we lost Albie, about a decade ago or so. Hey, could you tell us a little bit? I mean, how much did you interact with him? Is there anything you can tell us about Albie? He just seems to me like, in all honesty, like the coolest guy on the planet.
He was cool, yes. And I had probably more contact with him for quite a while than with the Games Workshop guys, because he was the editor of Games Magazine and I was contributing things to that. And then Games Magazine was associated with the shop, and Graham was the owner of both. I actually had Diplomacy Games and Variants published by Graham, but unfortunately he made a mistake somewhere along the line and got his shops in trouble, and they shut down. Yeah. His whole business, poof.
Okay, and you were. How did you find a group over there? Because I saw a reference somewhere where you made a reference to the King's College campaign, which you called quite stingy, I believe.
Well, there was a billboard. Well, a tack board, really, where people would tack up little cards and notices that they wanted to, players and so on. And I was looking for a group, and I found a notice, and I wrote to the guy. Of course, that time it was snail mail. And we agreed that I would meet and teach some people how to play D&D. Well, then he got sent down, which is to say he flunked out of King's College London and got sent to a lower university. That's the way things work in England. And I said, oh, well, so much for that. But one of his friends got my mail address from Jonathan, Bob Carlyle, and he arranged for me, and I walked down to University of London, which was quite a hike, but back then I could do that. And I met 4 people who wanted to learn how to play D&D, 2 males, 2 females. And they all became my friends and are still my friends. And I married one. Another one married my wife's best friend. And the other 2 who were not attached to each other at the time married. So I think that's an example of how Dungeons & Dragons can really be social and promote that sort of thing.
And if I could
and
be
of course,
so...
Having 2 females playing D&D at that time was quite unusual.
Yeah.
And if I could be so bold to ask, so is that still your current wife?
Yes.
Wow. So your current wife you met playing D&D.
Yes,
in
we're
England.
all still married. All three couples are still married, yes.
Did she ever read your articles and say, Lou, I think you got that one wrong?
Well, she did GM, but she had a minor problem that she felt she let the side down if the players were too successful, and she got angry about it. Well, that doesn't work very well. But she played
and you're
D&D
like, this is the woman for me.
She hasn't played D&D in like 15 years. She was never a general game player, although she will occasionally, but there are difficulties there. So, yes, it was unusual.
Okay, so when did you start? So when you started writing? You're amazingly prolific. I mean, honestly, I cannot think of somebody who has written as many articles, at least in the late 70s and the to the mid 80s as you. I mean, your article, you have peppered not only White Dwarf but Dragon Magazine. I think you were in Imagine Magazine. You were in Pegasus. You were in the Dungeoneer Journal.
A lot of magazines.
Everywhere. So what I thought was really interesting, as I mentioned about your articles, and why I think compiling them would be very useful, is you really did seem to, even at that point, and I assume you're getting a PhD with thoughts of going into academia, they really do seem to have a sort of a teaching aspect to, you're writing articles how to DM. They're very useful articles. Was that very intentional taking that kind of teaching bent?
In some respects, I'm a natural teacher, I suppose. It just seemed to me if you were going to write that kind of thing, you would want to try to teach people something. And I could evidently presented myself very forcefully. I don't know that. Well, I'll give you an example. Mark Miller, who designed Traveler and a great many other games, is far more well known in gaming than I am, wrote to me a few years ago and asked me how old I was because he thought I must be older than he was. Well, it turns out he's a couple years older than I am. But it was just the conviction that I conveyed in those articles that made him think I was much older. And now, you may be familiar with my Worlds of Design column on EN World, and that's twice a month, and I have managed to keep up with that for a year and a half now. So it's an interesting task to try to find these 600 to 900 word subjects that are worthwhile. But I present myself fairly forcefully there, and some people really get offended by that too, just like in the old days.
Well, and we're going to talk about some of those. It's always fun digging up old controversies. Well, and it's controversies about gaming, so it's not really, it's certainly not the end of the world. I want to ask you though about your King's College campaign, because I thought this was entertaining, because James and I have often talked about how long it should take, say, for characters to move up levels and things like that. And you said that campaign was the stingiest you'd ever heard of. You said 35 adventurers, 7 magic items, 47 dead, excluding resurrections, and no one near 5,000 experience points.
I said that?
Yes, that's what I have down here. Unless I've cut and pasted it wrong, I have you saying that yes, in the King's College London campaign, which is the stingiest I've ever heard of.
There may have been some total party kills early on. But that stopped once they figured out what they needed to do, which was have really big parties. So the players played several characters. And I've always been in favor of that, because if you just play one character and that character for some reason is incapacitated or is a magic user and saving their last spells, you don't have much to do. But if you play 2 characters at least, then generally one of them has something to do. Now, some people say, I can't keep track of 2 characters. But I say, what, are you weak-minded? It's not that complicated, especially at lower levels. Now, if you're trying to play 18th level characters, but we never do that. We never have done that. The game is broken at that level. It just doesn't work. But it did take a very long time to go up, like 10 adventures perhaps, to go up a level. So I don't know about the 5,000 experience points, and I'm not sure about the 47 dead, although I remember one total party kill where there were 18 or 20 dead, because it was a really big party. Sleep spells were poison. If you got hit with a few sleep spells, you were screwed.
Yeah, we just
that was one reason why you had big parties.
Yeah, we just had that yesterday. I ran my game online. Obviously we can't see it. And it's the same. The magic user was trying to cast it in front of the party, and I don't automatically allow that even though he's a genius, there's the dynamic of combat. So I made him basically make a saving throw to see if he landed it just outside the party reach, and he failed his save. So the orcs were slept, half the party was slept. Yeah, and if there were 10 orcs that they didn't see, it would have been game over. So you're exactly right. That's funny. Still happening.
Well, and if I recall, I saw you wrote an article where you talked about things that characters could bring into the dungeon for extra protection. Like, I don't know if you remember this. So James, why should you bring, I believe, let me see, dead rats, make sure they're dead rats in a bag.
Dead rats in a bag?
Any idea? Why should you bring, this would be like a new trivia segment for our show, yes. Why should you bring in dead rats in a bag into your dungeon? I mean, what adventure doesn't do that? They're not thinking. And just to let you know, Lou, some of us are that dim-witted. I played a single character that was multi-classed, and I kept forgetting. I was a cleric ranger, and James can confirm this. I kept forgetting that I was a cleric. I kept looking for healing.
Oh dear.
So James, why do you bring rats in a bag into a dungeon?
Well, let's see. Because they have disease, and you feed them to the monsters? That would be my guess.
Oh, Lou, do you remember? I think that was some of your advice, wasn't it, Lou? It's only been 40 years.
Well, I wrote an article that was titled "Ready for Anything," and that was where a lot of that stuff, and many people mention that article even today. I don't remember specifically why the dead rats, but certainly you could throw them down and a monster might stop and eat one while you're running away, because running away is, to me, part of D&D. Your typical D&D group, they beat open the door and they charge forward and fight and so on. They don't even think about running away.
Yep. Well,
that's not very, the game isn't intellectual, but it's not very cerebral. So the way we ran it, I guess I sort of taught the other players to do it, both at Duke and in England, was take prisoners and squeeze them till the pips squeak, as Lloyd George once said, and get all the information out you can. But if the referee doesn't allow any information to come out, there's no point in doing it. And that's typically what happens. The referee says, you can't learn anything from these guys, even with ESP and so on. And the other thing was run away, especially if what's going on has nothing to do with your mission. We were very mission oriented. And in the end, in North Carolina, I had some soldiers playing and they could understand that. Mission oriented. We're not here just to grub experience points or to grub treasure. We're here to achieve a mission, even if it's a mission that we assign for ourselves. Because to me, the way I wanted to play and the way I arranged my campaign was, it was a war between good and evil. And the players were the good guys who were kind of point men for the war. And so their mission was to smite evil. And if you run into a random monster and it's an unintelligent thing that isn't evil, why bother with it? Avoid it. Don't kill it for experience points. In fact, I got to the point where I not only didn't give experience for treasure, I didn't give experience for monsters. I gave experience for the adventure. And I wrote a little program in BASIC that ran on my Radio Shack Model 100 at the time. And I would sort of give the players a grade. And I'd put in the levels and so on, and it would tell me how many experience points they got. And of course, the levels and all that I put in specifically into the program, and how many levels you should have to, how many adventures you should have to play before you rose a level, and that was all built into the program.
Well, and maybe that's the professor in you, because James and I have talked about that, because Gary in the DMG says that you're supposed to rate the performance on a scale of 1 to 4 of each player, and that determines the amount of weeks of training and then the money. James and I have always been somewhat hesitant to, at the end of the adventure, to say, okay, now Jim the thief, no man, no, you're a 3, but so how did that go over with your players?
Oh, worked fine. They didn't have to keep track of what they killed. The treasure was only there to be used. I didn't have to put vast amounts of treasure in, because I did not use that bogus training rule. That's the biggest, most bogus rule in the game, because you end up having to become a money grubber to get enough money to train. And my point of view is there are 2 ways to learn. One is through experience, and one is through classes. And of course, I taught 17,000 classroom hours of stuff over the course of my career. There were many times when I wasn't teaching, but many times when I was. So you're fighting these monsters and so on. You're going to learn an awful lot from that. You don't need to be trained by somebody. You might be able to benefit from talking to somebody who's a higher level and has more experience, but you don't need to cough up vast sums of money to get trained when you've already been trained by yourself and by your own experience. But even if that made sense, turning the players into money grubbers was a really bad idea.
Yeah, we've had that. We have that exact same thing. But also just rating. The idea of, that was pretty good, but you didn't. You could have picked pockets there. I'm giving you a 2.78 on this.
It's a rating a rating for the party, not for the individuals.
Oh, I see. Well, but in the DMG, it talks about individual ratings.
Well, that's more difficult, and it opens you to controversy.
Right. No,
If you rate the whole party.
That's right.
See, I want parties to be self-regulating.
Yeah.
When I play, my objective first is to make sure everybody stays alive. Everybody in the party stays alive unless they're really stupid, at which point, if you're going to rush off and do that on your own, there's only so much I can do for you because I got to take care of everybody else. That's how I want all the players to be. It's again, very mission-oriented and foreign to many, many, many D&D groups nowadays because essentially you don't have to worry about getting killed. You're about character getting killed.
Right.
And if you don't have to worry about getting killed, you can do all kinds of zany, bizarre things. And you end up with, at the extreme, what I call all about me D&D, where each person, when their opportunity comes up, they're wanting to contribute to the story and do something cool and this and that and the other thing. And the other people just sit around and watch. And to me, that's a really bad idea, but that's the kind of thing you get into with certain kinds of story games. It's not a case of the referee, the GM, telling the players a story. It's the case of the players collectively writing their own stories with themselves as the star. Now, in general, you can set up Dungeons & Dragons and many other games, and not just role-playing games, in two extremes or somewhere in between. And one is you set up a situation and let the players write their own story. And the other is you set up a story that the players go through, and they're going to go through the story the way you organized it.
Right.
And my point of view of that one is, again, as I said, I'll take the professional storytellers. Thank you. I don't need you. You may be good, but most likely you're not.
Yeah. And I always thought the former was more fun as a DM because you get to be surprised by what happens. You're now really more of a participant.
Oh, yeah. As soon as you run the different groups through the same adventure and see the vastly different things that happen, it's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to ask you about, because you made a reference to your campaign being good versus evil. So I wanted to ask you about the Necromancer. So that's one of my favorite. I love the Necromancer class that you wrote for White Dwarf. As you know, I've mentioned I'm a huge fan of the Halls of Tiz and Thane, and I'll be put the Necromancer in draft form in that. It's later published. I think it's a wonderful class. I will use it as an NPC, but it sparked a back and forth between you and Don Turnbull, which I thought was interesting. And obviously not just because you're our guest here. I mean, I side with you. I'm like, what's the big deal? But Don somehow, I guess, took it that you were advocating for players to use evil characters, which actually I've done. And so do you remember sort of that back and forth you had with Don?
Absolutely not.
Oh, okay.
That's way too long ago.
So what?
I said in the rules that it was a non-player character to be used as a bad guy because I felt that the evil clerics, as just sort of a mirror of good clerics, just weren't my idea of an evil priest.
Yeah.
And so I made my idea of an evil priest. Now, I'm sure some people have ignored my advice and used that as a player character. But that was not my intention, although I did provide experience points, I believe, and levels and so on. That was
always true, though, of NPCs as well. I mean, even in the Dragon magazine, I mean, that was standard fare, was that you listed experience. You almost sort of like tempting people to run it as a PC.
Yes. And I run evil parties as well. And it does work in certain circumstances, and it's interesting to be in an evil party when you're neutral. I've probably been in evil parties when I was evil. And, if you've played the game enough, then you've experienced a great deal of smite evil in the name of God. Now, my clerics get to be crazy because they see the fighters just chopping people up with, 2 attacks around and so on. And so my clerics try to get hold of girdles of giant strength so they can really smite the enemy. They get a little insane, but high-level clerics tend to get a little insane anyway. So it did come back to this is a really good monster, but it's a human monster. And if people want to play evil characters, then they should be able to play evil characters. I'm not going to tell them not to.
Yeah, and that's what that's what the back and forth basically was, is that people then started writing in saying the necromancer has kind of crossed the line, you're encouraging the playing of evil characters, and then other people writing in, yourself included, your letters are published saying, look, it was meant as an NPC, but what's the big deal? If you want to play it, go for it. I mean, the necromancer was a loner. It didn't really fit very well. And so I just thought it was sort of an entertaining. What it did was, I think your necromancer class brought up a larger issue of, should D&D simply be good versus evil, which I think we had Tim Kask on. And I think Tim Kask, if I recall correctly, felt very strongly it should be good versus evil, versus a lot of other people who don't necessarily think it has to always be. I mean, look, seems like half the player characters tend to be chaotic neutral, right? Because they feel like they can do anything they want.
Chaotic neutral thugs, I call them, yes. And that was to me, and still is, what players want to be, because then they don't have to worry about doing good things, and they can do the occasional nasty or even evil thing, and yet they don't suffer the penalties of being evil.
Right.
And the penalties of being evil when I play is, I do no alignment on everybody in the party. If somebody's evil, I'm going to charm them out, and because they're evil. I'm not going to have them in my party of good guys. And, let the evil guys get killed, not us. So there are penalties to being evil. But a lot of the chaotic neutral thugs, they don't want to be called evil. They want to have no constraints. And, that's the 21st century in a nutshell, is a really big dislike of constraints.
And just to close a hole we talked about earlier is, yes, I think, James, you are correct. I think Lou's argument was the rats are to throw to monsters when you're running away to try to get them to eat it and stop chasing you.
Well, and thank you, Dan, for bringing the controversy with Don and the necromancer, because that was one of the questions from the chat. So Menu was very appreciative of you asking that question, because. So, do you have the chat up? Are you able to see the chat right now? Or?
I do not.
Yeah.
I don't have the chat
so
up.
That's exactly right.
So Lou, why did you? So as best I can tell, around the mid '80s is when you stopped being a regular contributor. I think late 1984 you stopped being an official contributor to White Dwarf.
Two things happened.
Yeah.
White Dwarf lost the D&D license and wasn't interested in D&D articles.
Okay.
The Dragon decided to change their policy and require buying full rights, all rights, to an article. And no self-respecting creator sells all rights to something unless they really get paid a vast amount. So I said, no, I'm not writing for White Dwarf anymore, or for Dragon anymore. And I looked in again some years later when Pietzo had it, and they still had that policy. And so I didn't write anything for Dragon Magazine. And to this day, I don't sell anything without keeping the rights. And that's why I can do these reprint books, because I retained all but the first world serial rights. In fact, Dragon later published a Best of Dragon, and I had several articles in it. And the question is, if you have first world serial rights, do you have rights to that? Possibly not. But I've never called them out on it. But there have been lawsuits about that, where somebody wrote an article for a magazine and then the magazine used it in another place, and they'd sold first world serial rights, and I think they won the lawsuit and got some more money.
Okay. And looking back on it, so are there a couple articles that you're most proud of? I mean, you obviously have so many. There's some that you think of particularly favorably?
Well, in White Dwarf, Barroom Brawl, and that has been played many times by many people and adapted to later versions and so on. And so that's one. And another one is the introductory adventure through Moria. And that worked partly because it was a good introductory adventure, because the people playing, the presumption was that they were familiar with the Lord of the Rings. My experience back then was if somebody had read the Lord of the Rings, and movies didn't exist, had read the Lord of the Rings and liked it, then they were likely to like Dungeons and Dragons. If they had not, then they weren't very good candidates for Dungeons and Dragons. There were exceptions like Albie Fiore had not read the Lord of the Rings but liked D&D. So I figured giving the players characters from the books would be really familiar for their first adventure. But what happened was I had to rate Aragorn and Gandalf, and I rated them functionally. You can rate characters two ways. Functionally is one, and emotionally, there's different names for it, is the other. So I had Aragorn as a 7th level ranger, and I had Gandalf as an 8th level cleric because he couldn't raise the dead, but he had a ring of warmth or a ring of fire, something like that. And he had the sword, and I had modified the rules so that clerics could choose either one-handed swords, two-handed swords, or bows as an additional weapon because I thought they were underpowered. So sure, he can use a sword. And a lot of people said, oh my God, no, Gandalf's like 18th level. Well, if Gandalf was in a D&D game with a lot of high levels, maybe he was 18th level, but in the world he was in, which was very low magic, very, very low magic, and very low powered too,
Right.
Then an 8th level cleric was as close as you got to godlike. Oh, just about, then you had Sauron above that, and 7th level ranger could kick butt all over the place. He got 2 attacks. So when they ran into the Balrog, which was an old D&D Balrog, which was a really fun monster that was good to fight because it had 10 hit dice and armor class 2. It's ridiculous I remember these things. And he did a 3 to 18 attack and a 1 to 12 attack. So he was tough, but you could take him out. And if you had a 7th level ranger and an 8th level cleric, you could hold him off at least. So compared to the D&D Balrog, they were quite well leveled, but people just couldn't stand it. They had to be really high level. It was an emotional thing rather than a functional thing.
And what I think is interesting is with respect to and I listed the Moria adventure as one that I noticed in particular when I went through all of your adventures, because what's nice about it is, as you talk about, is it's you enter and you exit. So there's a clear mission. It's not just for a new party, a new group of players. It's not just, go kill a bunch of things and get a bunch of treasure. You have a real goal that's easy to understand for a new group. So I liked that. And what was interesting about your Barroom Brawl, I noticed that it was voted the best, and I can't remember what year, but it was voted as the best article that ever appeared into White Dwarf magazine. Number 3 was Albie's The Lich Way, which is considered a classic. And so you actually, at least at some point in time, that was listed as the number 1 reader's favorite article, Barroom Brawl.
And I don't take credit, and I didn't take credit in the article for the actual idea of a brawl, because I based it, I'd heard of somebody who'd made a Wild West brawl of that sort, and I just said, well, we can do that for D&D, and that's what I did.
And just real quick with that, I mean, our friend Vic Dorso just made, as part of his Kickstarter brawl, I think there's that classic, the trope of you meet in a tavern, and a lot of the modern D&D people are like, well, the reason it's a cliche is because it's boring. You're all sitting there, it's awkward. What's the best thing you can do? Have action, a brawl, which is great. It's unlikely people are going to die because it's more fisticuffs, so that your logic makes a lot of sense. You get action, people are doing stuff, they get together, they figure stuff out, and there's some momentum as opposed to them awkwardly trying to discuss with each other, their backstory, which is, the way we played, was pretty bare bones. Yeah, I'm a fisherman, that kind of thing. So it was a great a way to propel the game forward, and a lot of people start their adventures with action. That's a way to do that. So that's a great I'm definitely going to look that up and see how that compares to what Vic did for his Kickstarter.
You'll find it's quite different because it was not intended to be a preliminary to a adventure. It was intended to be something you played at a convention.
Okay.
So it was a one shot.
Oh, interesting.
And each player was given a character, and that character had a secret motivation. Some of the characters were evil. One of the characters wanted to get a woman, however he could do it. Another character was a man-hater, because there were female characters. And there was somebody who was a lawman, and he was chasing a rat, a giant rat, or a weir-rat, and there was a weir-rat as well, and so on. And so it was the interaction amongst those, and just having a fight, and some of them could be taken out, and so on, and that was the end of it. And it worked well that way.
How long does a game take?
A barroom brawl?
Yeah.
I have no idea. I've run it at least once, but it was a long time ago.
Okay.
But at conventions, typically you're talking 2 to 4 hours.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
And when you have like 10 characters or more, it's going to take a while because each one has to do things individually because they're not on the same side. So I would think went more toward 4 than 2, but I don't remember.
Another article that you wrote that got a lot of attention was your article on why dungeons exist.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I thought it was quite interesting. I remember that article. That was even before we were getting ready to interview you, and I was going through the old Dragon magazines. That was one that really interested me because it was, and you've talked about realism, and you've written articles about realism in D&D and having some sense of realism. And I also sort of wondered, why? And I think you pointed out in your article, it seems a little silly, perhaps, to have all these dungeons and the place to be doing all the adventuring. Why are they there? And so you wrote an article trying to give a rational explanation, right?
Yes. And I have a tendency to look at games through a lens of, I'm in military history. PhD is in military and diplomatic history. But it breaks the immersion for me if what I could call silly things happen. And so I'm trying to find rational explanations, not excuses, for why things may happen. And the basic rational explanation for a dungeon is, if you have magic of the sort in D&D, you don't have castles anymore because they are not decent fortifications. You may have something on the top level, but you dig in. And that's where the dungeon comes from. I don't buy the mad wizard business.
Because isn't the we need a place to enslave the maiden that we've kidnapped, but isn't gunpowder basically, I think, right, is what brought an end to castles, right?
Yes, because it was at some point you could get bombards that would knock down the walls.
James, are you impressed?
That you know?
That I know that the decline. Yes.
Yes, that's good.
What was your PhD in military history? So if you were in England, it sounds like you were studying British military history, and if so, did that sort of inform the way you approach D&D?
No, it was British naval history. It was aircraft in the Royal Navy, 1908 to 1919.
Oh, do you play a World War I aerial game by any chance?
No.
Really? Okay.
I have been watching YouTube videos about 2 games that are very interesting. Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, which starts kind of in 1900, and Rule the Waves 2, which also starts in 1900 but moves up through where you can have aerial stuff. And I might someday buy one of those games, but of course, if you buy a game and you really like it, you spend an awful lot of time playing it. And I already have one stupid video war game that I play hours and hours and hours and hours.
So and of course you're very well known for Britannia, right? Which the game that's been through many, many editions. So if you were
another one this summer.
Oh, really?
With plastic pieces, and the interface has changed, but the rules are all the same. So it'll be in the same package with a 2-player dual Britannia that starts just as the Romans are about to leave and goes through to the end. And that's like 90 minutes or less.
And are you playing any? So, I mean, you're very interesting because at the same time that you were writing all these D&D articles, you were also doing board games. Do you still play role-playing games, or are you now just board games?
Well, I'd say that my favorite game is Dungeons and Dragons, but I don't have the opportunity to play generally. And that's partly because I moved, but when I was in North Carolina, all the people I played with had moved away. Um, Also, I've watched a lot of groups play here in Florida, and an awful lot of them are playing in ways that just don't attract me.
Well, do you know
it's-
where the current, in our humble opinion, where the current center, other than, okay, we'll be second, other than Lake Geneva, where the current mecca for first edition AD&D is?
The Medina. The Medina of, it's not quite Mecca. It's another holy city, but it's not.
Where's the Medina? Do you know where the Medina is?
How many of your viewers and listeners are going to understand what you just said? That's very educated.
I think a bunch of them will. I think we have a pretty.
That's good.
We have a small but educated cadre, so that's right.
I didn't understand it, but I'm putting it together based on context. So, you know where that would be? The Medina?
Where?
Orlando.
That's right, Orlando,
That's where
Florida.
we're at.
Exactly.
Oh, I'm so surprised you said that. And why is that?
Well, because we're in Orlando.
Guys there would be one way to say it.
Well, the first thing, Dan, which we pointed out, the one of the great, Dave Arneson was here for a number of years.
That's right, Full Sail.
Taught at Full Sail. So it's and we are just one of the various spiritual progeny that he had that came here for role playing, and then we've established this group here. We have hundreds of people in our. Now we don't play with hundreds of people, but there are hundreds of people in our meetup, and we play. Well, before the pandemic disaster, we had about 40 or 50. So you're now very close. You're within, you're in within 2 or 3 hours. You're in this in the epicenter of this.
It's about 2.5 hours to the airport from here.
Yeah,
we should have done this. We should have just driven to Lou's house.
That's right, and he'd have us sit outside. He'd be like,
"That's right." He didn't letting us in. I thought this was via Skype.
There was a time in North Carolina when we would have D&D weekends, and people who had moved away would come back and play along with the guys who were still there, and that was great fun. So we'd play at least 2 of the days out of the 3, if not all 3 days, and have very long adventures, obviously. And that's still something that would be interesting to do. But driving to Orlando and back in one day is a little much at my age.
It sounds like GROGTALK, October 9th through the 11th, may be an opportunity for Lou Pulsipher to come down and game first edition with us and be one of our guests. That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
It might
and James,
be if
you can pick him up.
There's a good chance you won't have your convention, you know that.
Well, we're being optimistic, so.
Yes, October is not bad. See, I'm worried about the World Board Gaming Convention, which is in Pennsylvania in late July, and I'm beginning to think that's not going to go.
Well, you're missing out. One of the advantages we have is we have very few attendees.
That's right.
How many is very few?
Well, GrogCon, we were part of the Crucible Convention, and the Crucible Convention is primarily a miniature wargaming convention, which is much larger, which is very successful. GrogCon, we could, if you count everyone who played in a GrogCon game, which included some spillover, I think we hit 30.
That's right.
30. So we could social distance.
That's
right. Yeah.
So don't count us out.
Dungeons and Dragons game just doesn't sound practical to me. Not without going to Zoom, and being in different places, which I'm not particularly attracted to.
That would defeat the purpose. What would you liken? So you obviously you were a professor for many, many years. Do you in some ways view GMing similar to teaching a class?
No, I never thought that way, at least not consciously. What is it like? See, I've used to say referee, You were neutral, but you aren't neutral. I mean, when you come down to it, all role-playing games are negotiations between the players and the referee, because the rules themselves are like miniatures rules. They're open to negotiation in many respects. But the GM's purpose is to scare the snot out of the players, but not to kill them. Because if you want to kill them, it's easy.
It sounds like teaching to me at this point. I'm not sure why you haven't seen the connection.
You have to be hard on people. You do have to be hard on people. And I am trying to teach them, but what I'm teaching them is the what I'll call the proper way to play the game. But a lot of people don't want to know that anymore. People don't want challenges in their entertainment. In the board game world, an awful lot of people don't want to play against anybody. They'll play in games where there are 4 players, but they each are doing their own thing. They're not playing against the other players. And that's a very strong trend in games, that you do still have people who want to play against each other, but it's a smaller and smaller group. Now, college students are kind of interesting because some of them are used to playing video games, and some of them play video games where they're playing against other people, and then they don't mind playing against other people in a board game. But you get to older people, 30s, 40s, and so on. The ones who play Euro-style games just don't want to play games against other people.
And did you ever have, so when you were teaching and a class was over, did you ever have a student come up to you and say, Dr. Pulsipher, I have a question? You're like, yes. In Dragon Magazine number 42, you argued that ever, even once, happened.
It certainly happened in teaching. I mean, I can remember talking with a guy for an hour after class was over.
He didn't want to ask you about like Austerlitz.
Well, the thing that I particularly remember from that conversation was he said he was 18 years old. We were taught in high school that the only way to learn something was to take a class. Well, this is academics, and I don't like academics. This is academics trying to make themselves more important than they are. Because there are lots of ways to learn things. You don't have to take a class. And of course, the people who learned it first didn't have a class to take, which I can say about game design. And yet you get to the point where academics say, if you don't have a degree in game design, you can't teach game design. If you don't have a degree in creative writing, you can't teach creative writing. It doesn't matter if you've written 5 novels or even if you're a bestseller, you can't have a full-time job teaching game design or teaching creative writing. And game design works the same way. And that's academics. And you don't want to get me started on the education system in this country. But obviously it's failing badly. I mean, look at the people we have out here doing stupid things, and I hope you guys are intelligent people and are opposed to Trump because idiot. But not everybody has that point of view, and part of it is education. They just don't understand how things work.
I guess I have to take my hat off now. My Make America.
Where's your maggot?
That's right. Well, it's inside. I have to go get it. Actually, I'm late for a protest rally. Can we wrap this up so I can get out there?
James is going to be protesting outside your house tomorrow.
That's right. I was going to bring.
As long as he stays outside, I don't care.
Actually, yeah. The first account, that'll be the campaign. That'll be the campaign. Look, this is like we're trapped in a house and we can't leave. Yeah, that's right. That's welcome to my campaign. That'll be great. But
so did any students ask you about D&D like after class, like a history class would finish?
Not that I remember. Now, at one point when I was teaching, I started a game club because that's the sort of thing you expect to have at a college. Is a game club, but I don't believe we played D&D. I had board games to play test, and they played those sometimes, and they played a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh. D&D didn't much come into it.
Okay. They missed an opportunity. James, do we have any questions on the chat?
No, they're commenting that the good doctor is the first one to drop the F-bomb on GROGTALK. Yeah, but so that's a first. So they want to give an award
Are
out.
we going to lose?
Did
Are we
I
going to
drop
lose
an
our
F-bomb?
Yeah, you did.
Oh dear.
That's okay.
Are we going to lose our FCC license?
Well, no, we put this as not safe for children. And on YouTube, you have to say if it's safe for children or not.
Yeah,
And
I know.
middle-aged men and speaking about Dungeons and Dragons is clearly not safe for children. They have better things to do. So than that.
Should we ask Lou some of our standard questions, like what does he think of Unearthed Arcana?
Well, when did you stop? Did you play for a long time, or did you stop after a certain?
I played for a long time, and I have played occasionally in more recent years, but the opportunity hasn't arisen very much. Like moving from North Carolina down to here really screwed up my schedule for 3 years altogether because we had houses to sell and we had a lot of work to do on them.
Well, you mentioned I'm sorry. You mentioned that that the games you saw were not to your liking. So maybe, and I get your feel of the old school aesthetic, what we call old school Renaissance. We play first edition. I think partly it's nostalgia, partly because we don't want to learn another system, which just for us, we know the kind of game we want to play. So what was different that you saw that didn't compel you to keep playing?
I played first. When second came out, I said it's not enough different from first to worry about it. When third came out, I did play it and referee it, but first edition and second encourages cooperation, which is what I want when I play the game. And it does that because it requires combined arms to succeed, and because the game as presented by Gary was, watch out, you might die. Well, third edition is one-man army. I'm going to find all the rules I can that make my character even more powerful, and I'm going to show off how powerful I am. And part of that is because it posited parties of 4 people, which is way too small. One of Lou's laws is the survivability of the party varies as the square of the number of party members. So a 4-person party is 16, and a 6-person party is 36, more than twice as survivable. If you only have 4 characters, they have to be one-man armies, pretty much. And third edition also became very crunchy. There was a lot of details to get through with the stat blocks and so on before you could play the game. Now, fourth edition I played but never refereed. And the one good thing it did was bring back cooperation to the point that you had individual powers of characters that could only act to help other characters. It was also very difficult to die because it was WoWified, World of Warcraft. Right. And they made a terrible mistake. They focused on combat instead of the other things that are interesting in D&D. And combat is what computers are good at in computer games. Now, 5th edition, somebody called it a cleaned up first edition. And to some extent it is. It's much simpler. It's easy to get into the game. They made it sure you could make up a character and get going. But it's very easy to stay alive because of bizarre spells like that. Revivify, I think it's a fifth level clerics can cast it. Yeah. You sort of shrug yourself and say, well, how do you ever die? But what they're doing is making it easier to play because many of the people who are playing now are not gamers even, let alone war gamers. Right. And they don't particularly want challenges. They want to have a sort of a playground. And okay, that broadens the market. And, if you're in publishing, you're there to have a broader market and make more money. So I can't object to that particularly. And you could play 5th edition and just cut out some of those spells. And then it would be much like first to me, only more highly organized and easier, more accessible.
Yeah, and they have hardcore rules. And, it's interesting. My youngest son, who just turned 18, so all my legal responsibilities are now over except to my wife, which is awesome. But he's trapped with me, but he's a good kid. he plays 5th edition, he plays 1st edition. With me, he plays 5th edition with his friends. And exactly what you're talking about, Lou, there is that if you play it as written or as without any optional rules, it has that feeling of, I call it the A-Team. I don't know if you remember the A-Team back in the 80s, where bullets are flying and the bad guys are exploding, but nothing ever happens to the A-Team. And there's no blood.
Oh yeah,
it's
like Commando.
Yeah, it's
the movie Commando.
But even there, they had some bloody. But the A-Team, nothing could happen to them, and there was some tension and resolution, but really there was no chance, and no innocents were hurt. It was clearly good and bad. Now they do have hardcore rules, but I think where they do go off the rails is there's so many classes and permutations versus the character. Really being a derivative, an extension of your play style. And one of the questions we had, since you did play OD&D, the original box, and then you went to 1E, was that a natural evolution for you, or did you appreciate, or did you like the earlier system?
I thought Advanced D&D was an improvement in general and in many details. I did use Unearthed Arcana.
Yes.
I tend not to allow lots and lots of optional rules because the optional rules and the new supplement and so on almost inevitably raise the bar,
power creep,
make things easier. Power creep, right? Power creep.
Lou, what did you like about, because we've had a lot of players on our show who have played OD&D, and they usually say they preferred OD&D because it was more wide open. They weren't so constrained by all the rules. What is it that you liked about first edition AD&D over OD&D?
It made some things more sensible, I think. And again, I worry about that sort of thing. There were more explicit rules that would avoid some of those controversies, and yet there was still a lot of flexibility. As I said, any RPG is kind of a negotiation between the players and the GM, and it reduced the need to negotiate, I suppose you could say, without constraining people too much. What we've had more recently, if you look at it from the point of view of the publisher, the great difficulty of D&D or any other RPG is finding competent referees or GMs. Yeah. There's a lot of complication there. It is work for most people. And so a lot of people just shy away from it. And sometimes the rules are written in super great detail so that the referee or GM can become a rules arbiter rather than the god of the world, which is what Gygax imagined it as. But that means you get the rules lawyers really arguing with the GM. And at some point, yes, arguments are part of the game, but it has to be that the GM is the final controller. And if the GM thinks that a rule is bad, the GM can throw it out. And for quite a while, Wizards of the Coast, TSR Wizards of the Coast, was going toward let's make this easier for the GM by giving him less responsibility. And I think perhaps with 5th edition, they got back to more of an equilibrium.
That's right. Page 230, you just basically quoted the afterword. You are the creator and final arbiter. You by ordering things as they should be, the game as a whole first, your campaign next, and your participants thereafter, you will be playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons as it was meant to be. And I think that's where, for me, OD&D is too loose. I think if you have the right players, and you have players who are going to accept that the on-the-fly determination that the games master makes is fair and consistent, great. Whereas future editions, they try to simplify. Oh, that's right. This is the reading from one of the Holy Trinity. I apologize. I didn't preface it before. And now we shall turn to book page 230.
Thou shalt read
that's right, from the book. 230.
The DMG?
Page 230.
One of the rules of D&D is don't worship the rules.
That's right.
And,
But don't we have?
I have friends who they want to figure out the demographics of a place, and the first thing they do is go into DMG and look for the demographic rules. Gary Gigax was writing a vast amount of rules. A book like that has vast number of words. My game design book has 100,000 words in it, and the revision will have 115,000. And that's a hell of a lot of work. And I'm not actually writing rules. If you write that much rules, sometimes you got to slap something down, or you write something that doesn't get tested, and that's the way it is. So why worship the rules? And yes, you can do those kinds of quotes because those aren't really the rules. Those are the ideas about how the game should work, which of course some people will ignore as well, but they're more likely to play a different game entirely than to continue to play first edition AD&D and ignore a lot of rules. Yeah. See, I never designed my own set of RPG rules because I was happy modifying the first edition. It allowed for that. You could have house rules, and you can change certain things. Like I say, I let clerics memorize twice as many spells as they could use because I felt they needed that flexibility. Otherwise, they'd be stuck as a hospital or a medic where they just have healing spells. I gave the thieves D6s and I let the thieves use bows because I could not understand why a thief couldn't use a bow. That's just nonsense. So everybody changes the rules, and you cannot worship the rules. But the idea in some of the later rule sets was that you couldn't change the rules really. You were just interpreting the rules. And I think that may have allowed more people to be GMs, but it reduced the quality of the game for people.
Yeah, it became trying to be a computer arbitrator, almost like trying to simulate a computer game using pen and paper, which fortunately, in some ways, I appreciate 5th edition trying to bring that back. And anyway, I'm just looking at some comments. People are thanking you for some exchanges you've had on Twitter, which you're very kind to respond about the game, and obviously your old White Dwarf articles. People have appreciated there. Someone had let's see if we got a couple other comments here. Did you run a regular campaign world, or did you run a out of the box campaign, if you at all?
I made up my own stuff.
Okay.
That was the idea of old D&D. I did use modules occasionally, but the world was mine, and the adventures were usually mine.
Were there any modules?
Today, I'll adapt an adventure because I'm not in the groove of so on and so forth, but the world is still my world, and the adventure will be somewhere in the world.
Gotcha.
Were there any modules that you remember fondly, that was there a favorite that you went through or that you ran?
Well, I didn't go through a lot of those old modules. The Giants certainly sticks in my mind. I never played Tomb of Horrors, Temple of Elemental Evil somewhat, but we didn't get that far into it.
Yeah, Lou Pulsipher running Tomb of Horrors would be amazing. We need to do like a charity event for that. That would be.
Yeah.
I suspect that I have read Tomb of Horrors, but it was a long time ago. I suspect that I object to it. That I think it's too difficult and too random.
I can sell you on it, Lou. You run a game. It's for charity, and only players who are Trump fans can play.
That's right.
That's a winner.
Who would admit that?
We better move.
I literally don't know anybody except perhaps one.
You live in Gainesville. You live in
stepsister who is a supporter of Trump.
You live in Gainesville. You're.
Well, I lived in Fort Bragg for 30 years, or in Fayetteville, which is next to Fort Bragg. I don't know any, but there seem to be a lot of them.
I can see it now. Join us for a controversial episode of GROGTALK.
Right.
I have some stock questions that are just like a hodgepodge. They don't have any connection, but they're important to me. First, You said that James is going to he usually humors me at this
Yes.
point. You said you're a Lord of the Rings fan, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Best of the books of the three, which would be your favorite? We're not including The Hobbit. The best of the three.
The first one starts very slow, and that's a flaw. My brother actually.
Oh,
My brother.
Oh no!
My brother actually started to read it and gave up, and
Oh,
then years
no!
later went through. So the
Okay.
first one is out. The other two are about equal.
All right. 1 point for James.
notice I have
Many
these
people
two.
have commented it's that the first one is very slow for the first 200 pages.
I have Okay. The first one took me 3 days to read. The second one 2 weeks. The last one 2 months. I started rereading them again. I ended at the first chapter, Two Towers. So I'm the exact opposite.
How old
All right, James.
were you?
James wins that one.
How old were you
At
when
the
you
time?
first
Well,
read it?
just recently I was. Well, what am I now? 51. I was 50. And when I first read it, I was about, I don't know, 12, 13.
We had to read in English Fellowship of the Rings. If it went a certain way, if I couldn't power through the first part, and maybe it was because it was an academic exercise where I was really excited, and then I read it, and the poems and the stories, and that weird guy. That's
All right, that's question number 2, and I already sense things are not going well for me. Do you have strong feelings one way or another about Tom Bombadil?
Well, see, Tom Bombadil is something that was left out of the movies, and quite rightly. It's there, but it doesn't particularly move the story along. It is something that could be cut out.
all right. Thank you,
James 2, Dan
thank
0.
you, and thank you, Lou.
Let me make an observation about the movies as opposed to the books, and other people have said this. The books are a story about Frodo and Sam, about ordinary people who become heroes. In many respects, the books are Sam's story more than anything else. When they made the movie, they made it Aragorn's story. And worse, they turned Aragorn into somebody who had tremendous doubts about a lot of things that the Aragorn in the books did not doubt. What the Aragorn in the books doubted was whether he could succeed. But the movies could have been a lot worse than they were. And when I say movies, I mean the theatrical ones. I mean the extended ones. I watched the theatrical ones in the theater. I'd never touch them again because the extended ones are much better.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know if I have them. I don't know if I've ever watched them in their entirety after the fact.
Oh, the extended doesn't. I think the extended is the only one that has the mouth of Sauron, right? I think.
That's probably true, but they added about an hour to each movie, so obviously there's a lot of extra stuff.
You know what really upset me is they kill the mouth of Sauron. They behead the mouth of Sauron in the movie. That did not happen in the book. That was it. And Dr. Pulsipher would know this as a student of diplomatic history, that you cannot execute the ambassador. I don't care if it's the mouth of Sauron.
Well.
Not again.
But an awful lot of occasions, the ambassadors have been killed and sent back in pieces.
Well, that was wrong.
That meant the negotiations didn't go well. So actually, there is a hypothetical that David asked: if Napoleon was dropped into the early 20th century setting, how long would it be before he understood the importance of air support? How's that for a random question?
Well, that's a really wild, far out question, but Napoleon was an artilleryman. So he understood the value of the big guns. I would have thought he would understand pretty quickly that air support is more big guns in effect. So I think it would not have taken him long at all, but who the hell knows?
I've got to ask my gnomes. Good idea for D&D, bad idea.
Well, gnomes are a traditional mythology thing, so they were going to be in there.
I'll take that as a point for me.
The silly gnomes, the tinker gnomes, it becomes silly, and I'm not into silliness. So it depends on what kind of gnome you got.
That's not the first edition D&D gnome, James. That's not. That's not right.
Well,
That's wrong.
Doctor,
It's a
I'll ask you
stereotype.
whose cup this is. Because guess what? It's not
Presumably
correct.
Dan's.
Yes, he knows me now. I'm the Bombadil Gnomes Fellowship of the Ring dude.
So
James,
you like whimsy,
Thank
whimsical.
you are a good read.
And
You've
I
read
am
your
not
student.
I'm not into whimsical, particularly in D&D, because I feel if you have the right group, if you're playing with friends, and see, I don't go to a convention and play with strangers generally. If you're playing with friends, the fun comes from the people, and it comes a lot from people saying things that they don't intend to have happen in a game, but it's funny, so they say it and everybody laughs, and then the game continues without that happening.
Well, yeah, I think
whimsicality is not part of mercenaries or soldiers of God completing a mission. And to me, I am a soldier of God, God damn it.
Well, and what's interesting is,
except when I'm neutral, and then I'm a mercenary.
Whimsical. I'm not sure it's in the thesaurus for it, but annoying is the other term for whimsical. And
well, not go that far.
You're ganging up on me now, James. This is wrong.
I see
It's now you sensed it's 2 against 1,
no,
and
it's
now
not it's a kindred spirit. Finally, some lucidity on the other side of Skype. Normally, I get your
James loves Donald Trump.
Dan, you only have to care about his opinion. My opinion doesn't count.
Well, you're a professor. I can't help it. I want your approval. We're gonna go we should do some ratings on you and rate my professor. So a lot of D&D knowledge. Should neutral clerics be able to turn undead? Not answered in the DMG.
The answer that I heard on another one of yours was it depends on whether they lean toward the positive energies or negative energies. Positive energies, they turn undead. Negative energies, they can try to control undead.
I don't know what's more shocking.
You could make a case that they can't do either one because they chose to be neutral.
I'm not more. I'm decide what I'm more shocked about his answer, that he's listened to another podcast of us. Was it prescribed to you as an insomnia?
Druids can't do anything to undead.
Right. And he listened to a prior podcast and still agreed to come on.
Exactly.
Even more so. All right, James.
I didn't listen to your theme music. I like rock, but somehow that just rubbed me the wrong way.
That's okay.
What kind of rock do you like? Wow.
Oh, even heavy metal and all oldies and so on. I don't listen to modern.
Modern
music is
so thank you. I wrote that for the show, so thank you. I appreciate it. It's thanks so much.
One for Dan.
That's right. Oh, you don't like it too? I'll change it. I'll put on. Put something else on.
No, I like it.
Right.
Oh, I like it.
Right.
I think it's rocking.
Right.
What could you tell us? And I know we probably need to wrap up, but I just wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the conventions you went to back in the day. I know you went to over in England. You went to Dragon Meet, and you went to the Games Day. How were those?
I remember very little about them.
And on that note,
I'm sorry. That's when I went to Origins 2 or maybe even Origins 1. I was in England from 76 to 79, and a lot of things happened in this country that I wasn't able to participate in because I was over there. So I think it was probably Origins 2. But conventions tend to run together in your mind.
You do realize you're creating the stereotype of the professor here. You don't remember the non-Turnbull issue or the conventions, but you remember the hit dice for a Balrog.
Well, it is the way it is.
Yeah, there's things we want to remember.
Back then, we memorized a whole lot of stats. How many hit dice does a troll have? 8 hit dice? I don't remember for sure. And some of those things stick in your mind forever. Yeah. But we encountered, used Balrogs again and again and again, and so you tend to remember that, where a particular convention you went to, and it was like a lot of conventions, and then it's gone.
And my final strange question is, what is your alignment in real?
Well, I used to think it was lawful good. Now I think neutral good.
Okay. Oh. James claims to be neutral good. But you clearly both can't be.
What? What does that mean?
You're different political. No, I'm kidding. All All right, James, anything else on the chat?
Nothing more on the chat, but you did briefly mention a new version of Britannia. What have you been doing? What are you doing now? What can people look forward to from Dr. Lewis Pulsipher? And how can they reach out to you if they're on social media or these type of things?
Well, on my website, I list where I put information about games, which is a fair number of places. I am on Twitter. My handle for almost everything is Lewpuls, Lewpuls. So if you look for that, you'll probably find me. So I design games. Right now I'm finishing a revision of my book, Game Design, and working on another book, which is a book about how to write tabletop game rules. And I have a lot of other books in mind, but sometimes I'm a slug and I don't work on the books. I haven't worked on the games very much. I always have new games coming up. For example, the other day, lying in bed, I came up with a new sort of Britannia-like game, again, after the Romans leave, that has only 13 areas and only 3 players and no dice. So that's very different from Britannia itself. In February, I had a 2-player game published called Stalingrad Besieged, which is a very simple game, although it's in a pretty elaborate package. Like I had, the original game was Hastings 1066, so the original one using this system. And the idea there was to have a simple game that was just essentially a deck of cards, and you could lay them out as though they were a board and play a quick game. Well, then I did Stalingrad Besieged, and the publisher said, we want to make more money. So instead of having a virtual board, they have a real board. They made the cards much smaller. They added blocks, if you wanted to use blocks as the pieces. And then they added 1.5 inch cardboard pieces, really, really large ones. So you have a choice between those 3 sets of pieces. The game is the same otherwise. I have the Britannia reissue coming out in the summer, along with Dual Britannia. There is a 3rd edition of Britannia, which is mostly finished, but I got put off by some comments from conservative people conservative about the game. They didn't like changes. Because you get that. Somebody who's played the stupid game 500 times, and I know people who played it 500 times, they don't want it to change. But it got through changing from the Avalon Hill edition, which was screwed up because the Gibson's edition was screwed up and Avalon Hill screwed it up more. And I fixed it in the Fantasy Flight edition. And that's why I was happy enough for this one this summer to have the same rules. But I want to make it a better teaching tool. And that's the 3rd edition, which will happen sometime if I don't die in the meantime.
So you mentioned...
At my age, you have to worry about it.
You mentioned...
And I continue to put up a video every week on my channel. I have courses on Udemy and Skillshare. So I have a lot of irons in the fire here and there.
So yeah, we got...
I write the column on Ian World.
Yeah, if you could just send me a couple of those links, we'd be happy to promote on Twitter and also on our show notes here. Anything there. Now, the last question, as far as game design, in your book on game design, what is the audience for that? Is that for game masters who want to really think of
It's for aspiring game designers. It's officially a video and tabletop game book. RPGs are not a focus.
Okay.
But yes, RPGs are an extreme of games. They're highly cooperative, usually, games that are very open. And yet, in tabletop games, what's popular is games, Euro-style games, which are very closed, and the opposite of those RPGs. And board games in general are not much like RPGs, although when I play, I always use a board, because when you have conflict, fighting of any kind, maneuver and geospatial relationships are vital to what you can do. I get the heebie-jeebies when I see people playing an RPG and they don't have a board. Although what that does do is it lets the referee, the GM, sort of decide who's going to have to fight who willy-nilly, because the players have got nothing to naysay. I don't want the game to be, as somebody called D&D version 3, fantasy squad leader. I don't want to go to those extent. But you've got to know where people are and where they can get to. And I don't want to wing that.
And it's interesting because obviously theory of the mind is a viable approach. People love miniatures. The game I'm running, I use virtual tabletop so we can see the figures moving around. And for some folks, they have to play with that because they like the tactical. It brings verisimilitude whereas other people with theater of mind, that's the only way they get verisimilitude. So it's to me it's tomato using that kind of thing. There's advantages, but you should play with the group that encourages the style that you like.
Oh yes, yeah. A lot of my mission, I suppose you'd call it, in the Worlds of Design column is to show people that there are different ways to do things. And even though I particularly favor another way, there are lots of other viable ways. And if that's the way you want to play, okay. But when you get into a game and you're in a game where they play a different way than you two, you're not going to like it. So if you're aware of these things and can perhaps ask beforehand, you can avoid a certain amount of unhappiness. Right.
Well, I don't think I've seen anything else in the chat, and we've gone an hour and a half, which I think is.
I'm disappointed in you guys. I thought it'd be over 2 hours.
Well, we have plenty more to talk about, but we're being very respectful.
He has seen the show.
I'm just sitting here. I'm retired. I am locked down. If you want to talk more, I'm happy to talk.
Oh, well,
you should run Moria for us.
That's right.
I'm ready to go.
Economics. All right.
But you've already read it.
No, I just skimmed. I know I didn't read each of the rooms. Well, I actually did kind of skim through the rooms, but I can't remember what's in there. How do I know?
I actually reused that several years ago. I went down and visited some people who used to live in Fayetteville and their sons. They have many sons. And so I ran the game for them. And that worked out pretty well, even though it was not intended for that. But they had, Jennifer had a high-level Amazon woman fighter character, and I put her in instead of Aragorn, and that worked out quite well.
Have you stayed in contact with any? I mean, obviously you married a D&D player, and so you're in contact with her. But so did you develop any real friendships with any of the people that we may have heard of back in the day? And if so, have you stayed in contact with any of them?
People that you may have heard of, probably not.
Yeah.
Because the D&D was a local thing, and living in Fayetteville, North Carolina is kind of a far piece from other places. And we haven't mentioned this, but for 20 years, I had nothing to do with the hobby at large.
Yeah.
Along about 1984, when I had to stop writing for Dungeon and White Dwarf and so forth. And I had to make a living. I taught myself computers and made a living that way. I pretty much didn't have anything to do with the hobby, totally ignored it until the late 90s, and I found out that Avalon Hill had collapsed. It had been sold. And Multiman Publishing, well, who was it who bought Diplomacy? Wizards of the Coast, I guess, Hasbro. Anyway, they'd said to Multiman Publishing, well, we don't know what to do with all this stuff, so you can have the rights to Britannia. Well, according to the contract, when it went out of print, it reverted to me. Yeah. So they didn't have the rights, but they didn't know that. Fortunately, the Multiman guys didn't want to publish it, and I finally cleared that out. But that was my first reoccurring contact with the hobby. So it was published in 1986. They sent me a couple of copies from Britain because it was originally published in Britain. And I opened the box, and I looked at it, I said, that's nice, and closed it up, and did not read the rules. And I did not actually see anybody play Britannia until 2004. And I went to PresCon in Charlottesville, Virginia, and there was a small Britannia tournament there, and I just sort of walked up and watched. I didn't tell him who I was. Well, you might as well take advantage of anonymity as long as you got it. But it came out who I was, and they had jutes floating in the English Channel long after that was supposed to happen. But there'd been a misunderstanding about the rules. And I said, no way, which amused everybody. And so then I realized I had to come out with a new edition just to fix the screw-ups. And fortunately, it's a robust game. So even though there were rules that were screwed up pretty badly, I think, it still worked fine for what it was. And then in the newer version, I added the constraints that should have been there to start with. And of course, some people didn't like those constraints. And to this day, there's one guy who says, well, the second edition of Britannia is a really good game, but the first edition was a great game.
Did you have to did you have to convince those guys who you were? Like, did they ask to see your driver's license? Were they Googling?
Not that I know of.
It reminds me, I don't know if any of you seen Parks and Rec, where it's the Cones of Dunshire, where it's being played in the office, and the guy wrote it, and of course he goes up to them, and they're quite startled to find it.
I know there are imposters. Somebody tried to, well, I think it was computerized, but a Lou Pulsipher showed up on Facebook that wasn't me, and started sending friend requests to my friends, and some of my friends said this is fishy, and they reported it, and it got taken down. I don't know. Ultimately, I think the purpose was to then start making offers to them for bogus crap, the kind of stuff you get on the phone. I don't know of anybody who's impersonated me otherwise. Of course, I am very tall, and if people know that, then that takes out an awful lot of impersonation. I used to be 6.
It takes us out.
I used to be 6'7".
Yeah, it takes us out. I think if we stood on top of each other, we may get to 6'1" or something like that. Where I think Dan is the most resembles his player character in real life, which is a gnome illusionist.
No. Oh, I'm so surprised.
I don't look like a gnome. I look like an elf. Come on, buddy, or a halfling.
But
you look like a halfling, perhaps.
Yes,
Thank you. Yeah. I'll take that over gnome.
Not knowing how tall you are, yes.
Yeah.
He's diminutive. When I look very large next to him, and my wife says I'm a small Greek man. So I appreciate Dan. He makes me feel better. But he has a full head of hair, unlike me. So, well, Lou, thank you for your time today. I hope you had a good time. Here's what people are saying. They've been pulsified. As your last name is now an adjective of adverb of excitement and fun.
Some people used to call me Lucifer.
Lucifer, that's good.
It sort of fits pretty well together, doesn't it? And I had a goatee and so on, and I looked Mephistophelian at the time.
Oh, wonderful. Let's see what else they.
But not anymore. Now I'm just a big sugar bear, and I gained a lot of weight and so on.
Well, we look forward, and I owe you a file of this, so I'll work on that this weekend. So maybe this week or next week, I'll send you the WAV file as we discussed. I would be happy to send that to you. If you have anything that's coming up that you want to promote, just let us know. We'd be happy to retweet it on our Twitter and social media. The last thing, go ahead.
I was just saying, it would be funny if he was like, I've decided I don't need that file.
That's right. Looking back at what we just did, it's really not worth it.
I thought it was going to be, the interview would be better.
I think he's gracious enough to accept it. He may not do anything with it at this point, so that'll be. But
okay, so
go ahead, Dan.
I was just say, is it time for D10?
Yes, it's time for D10. We didn't.
He's got one. He has.
Chaos. No, I don't have one.
It's his drink.
Use your watch as a substitute if you have secondhand. But I'm not wearing my watch. Oh well.
No, Grizzly, my familiar, is right over. Maybe Grizzly could roll, but Grizzly seems to be eating. No, so what we do is at the end of each episode we roll a D10.
That's chaotic.
And I'm lawful neutral. You didn't ask me my alignment. I'm lawful neutral. It is chaotic. I love random, but I'm lawful neutral. That something doesn't make sense. I'm confused.
No, it doesn't. I mean, I've run into characters who literally flip a coin to decide what to do.
Oh, yes. I have rolled I've rolled a die as a cleric to figure out what spells I was going to pick for that session. And I wasn't very popular.
And he's lawful good. at the time. That was great.
It's wrong. It's wrong.
Well, if it's wrong, I don't want to be right.
This,
All right.
This is what I have to deal with every week.
Change his alignment.
That's what I need.
Change the alignment. That's right. I'm the only right. You're actually chaotic. We're all chaotic neutral when we play. Realistically. All right. So who's going to roll the D10 then?
Well, I think Dan, you should, because you set this up, and again, it was been a pleasure to speak to the
and
good
then
doctor.
I can deny it. You know.
That's right.
I have deniability.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So here it is. Oh.
9. Wonderful.
That's a 9.
Congratulations, Doctor. You've earned the 9, which is
bravo.
Which is
it was the F-bomb. Gave it a +2.
That's right.
You chaos.
We are chaotic.
Yeah. It's clearly we're not structured. I mean, we have this script that we supposedly follow, and it just falls apart halfway through it. So we don't follow to our own rules. But
James, do we have the legal right to use, when he said you chaos or whatever, do we have the legal right to use that snippet and then to play it as a little soundbite?
I believe so, in the second world or third world or the nth world or something like that. But considering no one watches our show, I don't think, part of it, there'd have to be a suit on damages, and what damages would it have?
There's no damages.
Right, so
exactly.
It'd be frivolous and they would throw that out. So, but
I don't.
Go ahead, sir.
I don't have the phrase memorized, but somebody's compared doing a podcast to the question of whether, if a man does something in the forest and there's nobody to hear,
that's right.
Did it really happen? Can the woman object to it? And podcasts, is there anybody to hear?
Well, and the
obviously,
way James,
if you have people online now, somebody's listening. That's
like
good.
5.
Yes.
Well, yeah, because we
5.
we looked
Slow down. We have 15 people online right now, and that's down from.
Sounds good to me. Sounds really good.
Yeah.
Because James and I looked at we surveyed the landscape, and we said to ourselves, there just doesn't seem to be enough D&D podcasts. We really should fill that gap.
Right. There's not enough middle-aged white guys talking about a game from 40 years ago to other middle-aged white guys. And go figure, there are people who want to listen to that. So I know this is also shocking. I shared with Dan our demographics. And what the shocking part was, when this pie chart of gender, there was a sliver of females who actually watched the show. It was more than I thought, which we were very impressed. So yes, our demographic is not 99.97% male with 0.003% not claiming their gender. We run 25 or 30%, which again was very good.
Yeah,
Wow.
That's because we have 4. You can't have 99.997% with the small viewer size we have.
Yeah.
You'd have to have much larger. It's 20% because of the 5.
That's right. 1 out of 5. Wow. 1 out of 5 podcast listeners are female in our case. That's good. 4 out of 5, like dentists.
When we say 1 out of 5, we mean literally 1 out of our 5.
That's right. So,
and yet you keep doing it, and you have done it. What is this, episode 40 something, 50 something?
56. That's right. We've done it for a little over a year and a half. And again, it was to support the
every week.
We were going to every other week, but now because of the pandemic, it's kind of like, you're about to, not that we have this issue, you're divorcing your spouse, but now you're stuck. You're like, well, you might as well, we're here. Got nothing better to do. So Dan has tried a couple of times to break up, and I
keep trying.
I unleashed the pandemic to keep this thing going. So
yes.
of course I contacted the Chinese to unleash the virus. I've been waiting this time to. You're welcome, doctor. There you go.
just like the Chinese. Global warming is a Chinese conspiracy.
Well,
that's another Trump thing.
Hold on.
Oh boy.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up now, doctor.
I gotta go.
Actually, my internet detection has said that our lines are being tapped just as you're speaking this. Please, this is a crank call.
Who cares?
It's a crank call.
Who cares?
I don't want to go to the re-education camps. That's what I was chatting with people. It's like, I said it's too bad the doctor's going to be going to the internment camps in January when the election happens, but. It'll be nice to. Oh, but we got right on, doctor, and we'll make sure. Actually, we won't do that. We'll just put a 5G tower on top of your house. That's what we'll do that for you as well. So,
My wife is English, and I suspect she'd be happy to move to another country.
We're exporting our best, sir. I'm sure there are a lot of countries who are following our lead in many things. So we're that American exceptionalism of craziness, we don't have this here. In fact, that's one of our claims to fame. Dan and I, we are completely ignorant of geography, and we have folks on from Australia, Japan, and they bash their heads against the wall when we're like, Japan, Australia, how close is that? It can't be too far. They can go see each other. So embrace the ignorance, sir. That's what we do. But again, thank you for your time. And David Thompson, we have an empire. He is the Chamberlain of Australia. He has welcomed you after your 2-week quarantine from the U.S. They'd be happy to take you there. So it's part of the Commonwealth, right? Something like that. So. Well, thank you for your time again. For those who are listening on the podcast, you can listen to us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcast. Thanks again to everyone who's listening. And I appreciate everything, Dr. Pulsipher, you've done in the past and you continue to do. Good health, Godspeed. I hope everything's well up there. And all kidding aside, if there's anything you need from us, we'd be happy to sojourn up to Gainesville. It's a road trip. We'd be happy to help if you need our assistance.
Well, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Pulsipher.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yes, and if it.
But we didn't make 2 hours. I'm disappointed.
Well, because you can come back again. We can't have a repeat guest. That's not a problem. So for Grog Talk, I'm James.
And I'm Dan.
And we will see all of you next time on Grog Talk. Take care.